Right. Shut Up and Scale returns for the third episode. See, it wasn't really a pilot. We were always going to do them. It just sounds sexier to say. I was doing a pilot of a new show. It sounds cool, doesn't it? Like, it was episode 1. So we're on episode 3 now. We've sort of got the beat down of how we're going to do this roughly. Obviously, as I will always point out, you, the fan, get to submit a take that will, at least one take that will be examined each week. That'll be later in this episode. Go to the Last Nation Discord, subscribe, and there's a channel in there, Shut Up and Scale, where you can submit your potential point. The one we're going to start with, because it's such a wide open but potentially spicy one, is actually Nymaera has a pretty interesting one. So this, again, to show how this isn't just locked in the here and now, it can be about any period of League of Legends or any aspect. So what is your topic?
Okay, so this one can actually be from any period of League of Legends you'd like. My question to you and to myself is, if you could change one community perception in League of Legends, what would you change and why? Immediately, in terms of context, I think about things which you think are revisionist history. I think, for instance, over time, there were things like, was Faker's LeBlanc counted in MSI Game 5 finals?
Course.
I would argue no. I think that is revisionist history. But I think there are many players who've had very misjudged careers over time. And I think there are sometimes some wider topics which I think are also misjudged over time. So if I'd lead off with my take here, one thing which really pees me off is when people think that aggressive teams are bad at macro. If you fight all the time, you are bad at macro, and you're just fighting for the hell of it. You're a good skirmishing team. No, sometimes fighting a lot is the intelligent thing to do, and it is actually good macro. And a slower team that's not picking fights and is actually just taking towers instead is actually a bad macro team.
Not an LPL bias take this at all, is it, Nymaera?
Perhaps that's where it came from. Perhaps that's where it came from.
Okay.
But funnily enough, actually, the game which got me onto this was actually a Korean team, and it was against an LPL team. If you look at World's Swiss stage last year, game 1 of KT versus Top Esports in the Swiss stage, I think is a wonderful example of picking fights is better macro than waiting and scaling. Because in that game, from memory, they were against a Kai'Sa Nico composition, all about firing all their ults at once and trying to play these big plays. And there was one moment where a fight had happened and KT go from bot lane to top lane. And even though they're half HP after the fight, they realize they have cooldown advantage and they can just fight again because the enemy team doesn't have their ultimates up again. And it is objectively the correct decision in the game to fight more often because they're not going to have all their ultimates up at the same time. They use that to great success and they completely blow out Nico. It's one of those games in Swiss. I can't remember if it's game 1 or game 2 actually. But this is just something which I hear time and time again that's wow, they're not a good macro team, but they fight really well. Now, there are teams that fight all the time and they are bad at macro, and they fight just because. But there are so many examples of this over time, all the way back to Unicorns of Love back in season 5, where it's wow, is this the chaos style? No, they're just playing around cooldown economy. They don't want you to have flash, and that's a good thing for them. It is objectively a good thing. So that's one of the first things which I thought of, and it really annoys me when people say teams that are aggressive are bad at macro. That was my starting point.
So Nymaera, I'm going to say this question is how long is a piece of string? And I feel that everything we do on this show is challenging community sentiment and revisionist history all the time. I'm thinking, how deep can you go on? I feel like this is a topic we could do over 10 shows or something, you know what I mean? But for your for your actual point, completely agree with you, I think that when we talk about aggressive teams, I think it does a lot of disservice because I think in League of Legends, everything is about risk management, right? It's risk management, it's about cooldowns, it's about power spikes, and it's about inevitability, right? I think
it's about summoning insights and power spikes.
Yeah, exactly, about scaling. But what I would say is that, so first of all, I think, agree with your point. I think that often, when your team only makes a play on one side of the map and you make very few mistakes, it's very easy for a fan to see this team is not messing up. They're not making mistakes. They don't see these kind of things, right? They don't see the missed opportunities. And I think that I think that this is something that the entire ecosystem in the West, it has been very, very poor at representing, and I'm not just talking about the broadcast, I'm talking about co-streamers, I'm talking about analysis and that kind of thing. It's very, very easy to make fun of somebody for clicking their buttons incorrectly, but even the content that I've seen that criticizes teams for missing out on a certain thing, you'll see fans immediately replying and say, "Oh, how can you blame this one person? Maybe it's a team call. Maybe it's like maybe somebody on the team, he wanted to do that, but somebody on the team called him off or that kind of thing, right?" And people get very, very defensive over these kind of missed opportunities, right? And I think and I don't know why it's come around in this type of analysis, but you definitely saw it, especially in NA back in going back to the TSM Cloud9 days, and I've never really understood why this happens, right? It's always that the passivity is always rewarded, right? Because you can always see the insane come from behind team fight, and you can always reward people in your analysis for that. So I agree. I think also teams that play slow. I think the important thing actually when you're looking at the quality of teams is how on the same page they are, right? Like I can think of the best example of this I can think of is Team Liquid, the Bjergsen Bripper roster, right? 2021, 2022, something around that, right? Yeah, 22 with Bripper, sorry, top, and
it was the one you ruined.
I mean, Santorin.
Exactly.
Spike when
Gotta love Thorin. Has the receipts.
It's true.
I mean, I feel really bad for Santorin. I don't feel bad for Santorin at all, but I sympathize with Santorin for the Baron gaining. No, but this is a very good example of this, right? Where you have hyper aggressive, flips everything top laner with Bjergsen, who is the scaling guy who's not going to take any risk at all, right? And I think those are the situations where you can have a slow playing team that has aggressive elements that never take advantage of those elements. And I think that's kind of where you often have these really passive teams that have these players that see the game in another way and they don't really take advantage. So I agree with you on both.
Yeah, because the thing which I'd say with that is effectively playing aggressively or passive isn't good or bad macro. You can be a fast team and have good macro. You can be a slow team and have bad macro. You can also be a fast team with bad macro and the opposite too. But I just feel that combination of slow is good, fast is bad really annoys me when it just misses the nuance.
But just before we move on that, how would you go about educating about people about this? Because it's very easy to show, look at these guys, they're so fucking stupid, they're fighting a dragon.
Well, that has to be work over time, right? So that has to be from content creators, like us in the community, like when you're doing on broadcast and replay, on cast as well. Like for instance, it's the thing which I've been trying to do on my LPL streams is talk about these things. I'm trying to get it down into catchphrases. So the big one is cooldown economy. If you're playing Jarvan, you don't want people to flash out of your cataclysm, so you try and force flashes so the important cataclysm in a dragon fight they can't escape. That's a pretty important one. Same, in fact, we saw a game today with a Malphite jungle, and it's a similar kind of thing. There's another concept I call full contact team fighting, which is a little bit different in terms of sometimes in team fighting in the West you just think you have to peel back and kill the first target, whereas in the East they actually just say no, we dive your backline so they can't follow up on the engage. And there's a very different kind of category around that too. It's a hard thing because the community is so split really between different streams, but it comes through various streams and kind of trying to really hammer home messages. That's what the broadcast used to be really good at, right? Because everyone watch at the same place and get educated that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think part of the shame, part of the tragedy of the main broadcast is they have Odo on this, right? And when Odo was on Splice, we had this idea. Well, we talked a lot about something called two-stage engaging, right? Which is where you do an engage to bait a large cooldown, let's say Mel
or Shinzo ultimate right now.
Yeah. Or Sivir spell shield was the big one because that's 30 seconds or close to 30 seconds, right? So you do a fake engage to bait the spell shield and then you immediately re-engage afterwards. And I know he knows a lot about this kind of thing because Odo is probably one of the best, definitely a top 3 team fighting top laner in Europe, European history, and they never let him talk about these kind of things, which I think is kind of a shame, is what I would say. Yeah, but yeah, I take your point. I think it's something that always. So I don't know Korean because I can't really speak Korean, but I know enough Chinese to watch Chinese content creators, and this is something they do talk about. Chinese content creators do talk about, whereas I've noticed that the Western commentators, specifically LCS and a little bit LEC, don't talk about as much. So I think that's a shame for sure.
Right. By the way, he just was given that as an example, though, Peter. Obviously, the whole point of this topic is we get to pick our own notes. So do you? Essentially, it's just a free chance to queue up. What's your little rant? What's the player or the thing in League that people get wrong? But your whole time you're it wasn't like that. Like he says, the one he mentions there. I even did my own video on exactly the same thing. I actually show you that in Game 5 of the MSI First of all, like, it's not just porn, it's like the whole comp's built to try and stop LeBlanc, and then even then they don't do it. If you don't know, if you watch the game, Faker's getting kills off all over the place, but he looks awesome.
Yeah.
The real problem is his bot lane feeds like a motherfucker, and they just can't win the game. So and that's actually a famous one.
Time Nautilus on
I think so. Something nuts like that, bro. Yeah, exactly. But sadly, it's remembered as like Faker shouldn't have picked LeBlanc. It's like, mate, that was like the least of their problems. So, do you have one like that, Peter? Do you have one that you always think of, like people just get this wrong about a player or something in? Like...
Oh yeah. I've got two, but the big one that really like is a pet peeve of mine is Inspired is a bad teammate. And this
Okay.
this is like, so I don't know. I blame FlyQuest for this as well, right? Because I know exactly what Inspired is very. Is this politically correct thing to say? He's very Polish.
It is, yeah.
And I mean, for people that don't know what that means, like I've had a talk with like Polish players that I've worked with in the past. You know, people like Mystique and Jankos and things like that. There are fewer words for like nuance, like for feelings, you know, in the you know, in English we have a lot of words that you can use to moderate
the language, right? Yeah.
I mean, by the way, even culturally, we do that intentionally. Like, especially, in fact, this is something Americans have a problem with. British people don't say things directly. You talk around it and you infer what you mean. That way, you don't hurt someone's feelings, right? Polish person will just be. They actually value like economy. They want to just say what's wrong. Like, this is the thing that's wrong. And if you fucked up, you fucked up. But to us, that would be like the implication would be crazy to say that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And like I've spoken with enough Polish people because this is something which has fascinated me.
Yeah.
It's similar in Chinese, right? Like you don't have these moderating words in Chinese at all, right? Like it's very, very direct. It's as few words as you can possibly have. And as a result, you know, when Inspired is saying on the, you know, they have voice contact and he's saying like, shut up. You know, he's not saying shut up because, yeah, I don't value your opinion. It's just like, yeah, okay, move on. Let's move on to the next
it's a really efficient way to say stop, move on. And in fact, it was Inspired and APA were on the Pros podcast, I think it was, like LCS content. And they actually talked directly about that and just saying, we don't think we're flaming each other. We just think it's like efficient communication. Now, funnily enough, that whole conversation about language, I've actually thought about it. Well, this might be a topic I talk about in the future on this show, because I actually pitched that as a university like paper for someone because they were in their esports degree, because I think that the languages we communicate in League affect the way that we think about the game and our idioms. In fact, we might have even talked about this in Summoning Insight before, Thorin. So there's a phrase in Chinese which I think is effectively, it doesn't look good, but we'll try and outplay. And that really informs the mindset. So if you're bringing this to Inspired too, in terms of actually like, well, it's just efficient communication, and while it might come across as harsh from somewhere else, I can really see where you're coming from. I hadn't seen that angle, but that's really interesting.
But the problem with Inspired is he spent so much of his career in NA, where, trust me, like in NA, even the British people I've worked with in Europe, you know, people like Kasing, you know, you really have to be careful about the nuance how you say things in North America, right? Like, I don't want to say snowflake, but like it matters a lot.
But it is where, Peter, since you're saying British people, I can tell you, Alfari's a pretty chill guy, mate. He's not a guy who goes out his way to talk, but he was considered like difficult and stubborn just for sort of not going along with stuff. Yeah, exactly. It was blowing my mind, mate.
And I mean, so I say that, so that's what I say in terms of Inspired, right? But the problem that so that's it's not, the negative is not as bad, but there's so much content that they do around it, which like FlyQuest did that video at Worlds where it made him look horrifically bad. When if you like know what was actually happening, they cut out so much of those things which were happening behind the scenes. And
by the way, this is even something that was addressed on Summoning Insight. I actually made this point to people that in those videos, exactly the ones you're talking about, it always looked like it's Inspired going off, because people were saying like, because Nukeduck just joined Heretics, like, was he even really coaching the team though? It was just Inspired. It's like, no, the problem is, I imagine when Mithy and Nukeduck said their part, that wasn't sexy, so they just cut that out of the documentary. Like, they wanted the players arguing. That was the whole point of the drama, of course.
Yeah, of course. And look, I'll just say, this is not a criticism. I really want to be clear. Like, different people have different coaching styles, but Nukeduck and Mithy are like really combative, really like harsh. You know, Melzed style. You know, like they're really harsh in their feedback, and obviously they don't show any of that feedback. Okay, so that's the thing I'll say for Inspired. But I'll say for Inspired, the big difference, and the reason why I'm going to say Inspired, not toxic, is because he, more than almost any other star player, believes that you can have potential from anywhere. You're going to work with rookies. He understands how.
Okay, that's big.
The thing I've always said is with Jojo and Danny, he knew he was emotionally intelligent enough to understand that the way that you speak to Danny is different to the way that you speak to Jojo, right? And like,
well, I would argue that's one of the most important coaching things, right? Because we talked about, what makes a good coach on one of our previous weeks, right? But I think one of the biggest things about coach is communication. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter the information you have if you can't communicate it. That is what makes the difference between a player and a coach, really.
Yeah, and same. But if you have a star player on your team who understands that as well, like if you have a star player who doesn't understand it, then you as a coach have to moderate it. But if you have a star player that does understand it, it frees up so much flexibility. Like it's so much flexibility. And like, I give a perfect example of this, which is Impact was on that team. Impact, very, very direct, has the highest standards for everybody, pushes everyone to the same standard, like treats everyone exactly the same to a fault. Because he treats himself like pretty harshly, so he treats everyone else like this. Inspired never like that. Inspired always understands. You could say one thing to Jojo, you say one thing to Danny, you say one thing to Vulcan, you say, and that to me is like the opposite of toxicity. And the problem is, all the content around him and all the voice comms they show, even the broadcast, even the LCS broadcast like shows him, they never show him say anything positive. Like they never show him say, and the only time when they've ever shown him say anything positive, I think was the weekend when Danny got when EG won the title and Danny got that like pentakill with the Baron thing, and he's the one who's like cheering him on. He's like, oh my god, you're the best player in the world. Like I've never seen something so, and like, and this is the side we don't see, and this is what triggers me the most, right? Like,
didn't you say he literally sort of was the guy who would like put his arm around someone like Danny and be like, "Hey, it's all right, mate, we'll get him." He was kind of like also off camera was actually like very positive and as a person, right?
Yeah, exactly. Not like, I mean, again, sorry, trying very hard not to be racist, but in terms of, again, it's language, right? Like he's not the most. The words
emotionally
he uses,
nuanced or whatever.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not emotionally. The words he uses aren't always the kindest,
right.
but his actions are the kindest, right? Like it's the type of guy.
That's a good way to phrase it. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody's going through a hard patch, right? Like, and then so we have our bot lane is going through a hard patch in scrims, right? So he says, okay, I'm going to pick Trundle or Ivan, and I'm just going to camp you the entire day. Or he tells the coaches, yeah, we're going to do that. End of the day, stomping every game in bot because we're playing 3v2 in bot lane. Everyone's really happy, but he understands that, okay, maybe it's not the best practice we need, but it's what the team needs. And like, this is the thing we never see about him. And like, yeah, so that's my big thing. Like, I wish in a different world, Inspired would be considered like one of the great leaders of like,
for sure,
like he's on a full Polish team, because the league is like CS or something like this, and he brought out the best of all the rookies he's worked with and things like this, and we see Inspired as a great leader, but instead, nope, toxic arsehole.
Put it this way,
don't want him to win.
in this analogy, because obviously right now this is relevant. Essentially, he's like the Polish Elyoya in that sense.
Yeah, perfect, exactly.
He's a captain and a proper leader, yeah.
But the difference I think between him and Elyoya is that he will give anyone a chance,
right?
Like you have to prove. His default is you have you are not bad until maybe he only gives you 2 weeks, right? But his default is you have a chance. From what I've heard about Elyoya, it's you kind of have to prove yourself to him. But once you prove yourself to him, he will back you to the end of the month, right? But you just have to get past that initial bump. I'd say it's the difference.
You know what, boys? Here's the thing. If we're going to do a show like this, it's by definition allowed to be self-indulgence. You know what? Fuck it.
Go on, then.
Cue up the greatest hits, because I'm going to do my all-time rant of all time. So it's not going to be a long one, but it's essentially
Do I have a time for a drink or what? I'll step outside for a minute.
Get the bingo cards ready, because there's going to be so many classics. So here's the obvious one that I want to address. If I could change one community perception, it's a bit like what you were saying, but the inversion of that, actually, Nymaera, which is, even though bizarrely, probably the bias that we've all watched Korean teams that just played boring macro win a million worlds, especially the old SKTs of the 2010s, which was their whole style. Because what's funny is, for teams, because everyone's biased against the LPL, the teams that skirmish all the time are just idiots, aren't they? TS, what are they doing? That's not League of Legends. Or morons, why? What are they playing like this for? What you should do is play macro and play correctly and just play on that. But what's bizarre is, for players, we do the opposite. For players, you're a pussy if you don't just go in all the time. Why aren't you just trying to solo kill him? Bro, don't you think you're the best. Wow, this guy's a stud. So what's bizarre is, obviously one of my favourite players of all time is the Danish mid laner Froggen, isn't it? And what people used to get wrong all the time about this player is they took passivity as a player to mean you're a coward and you're scared to go in and actually fight. So what's funny is, his is probably the harshest contrast ever, because his narrative was actually set before anyone played just a laning style. Actually, back then, everyone used to basically try to snowball the game in lane by getting solo kills, especially the mid laner. Remember, the mid laner could be playing shit like Zed or fucking Fizz or something insane. So obviously they were playing like solo queue and trying to get a really early kill off and then snowball the kills and get the jungler to come and just like roll the game and get like 10 kills basically. Whereas Froggen's style basically was just, I'll just perfectly CS. And there's two aspects to this that are really key to understand. One is, he didn't do it because he didn't have the hands to go in and be aggressive. It's true, obviously he did play things like an Ivia, which you wouldn't go all in at like level 2 or something, right? True, he did play the champions that are more like you farm the wave out. But first of all, in the early days, he didn't. He played loads of stuff. He played fucking Lee Sin. He played wherever he wanted mid lane, right? But there's two angles to this. One is, he actually did the opposite. He is the person, if people don't know, that had the epiphany one day. This is real. Shall I tell you a cool story that's a side tangent to this? I got to see in real time how this wasn't just like something I came up with. I was once at an event in 2016. It was a CS major that was in America. And at this event, Froggen, because he lived in America at the time with like Echo Fox or whatever, just came along to this major with his girlfriend. I think it was like a fan of CS at the time. And they were just at an after party. And at the after party, because G2 had a CS team, Ocelot was there. And they actually hadn't met for a couple of years. So they were like, I was talking to Froggen, then Ocelot came on. They were all just having a chat. And Ocelot literally said to Froggen he turns to me and he goes, when this motherfucker came along, none of us even knew what he was doing, because we'd all be trying to like find an angle to go in, and he would just sit in the lane getting all the CS. But what would happen is, he would just hit perfectly last hit every CS, and then you'd look at the scoreboard and you'd think he hasn't done anything all game, but then he'd have like an item up on you. And that was basically Froggen's epiphany was, I forget what the number was in his era, but it was something like 15 million kills is the amount of gold from a kill in the game. So actually, wait a minute, if I could perfectly get 15 million kills every time, and also if I do it well, like deny you some of the minions by fucking with how you lane, etc., essentially that's like just getting a kill with no risk. And that was his epiphany, was, wait a minute, if you're the mid laner, especially because he can farm like a motherfucker, why don't I just get to my items and win the game? Why do I have to play this like crazy roulette early where we both go for crazy kills, and if you get the kills, you win the game and snowball off me, and if I get the kills, I'll snowball off, but it's not reliable. So there's that aspect, which wasn't like he was being a pussy. If anything, he actually figured out secret tech. It's just, it was a long time ago, and then admittedly, he did make this sort of like, it became a cliche that he did that all the time. And then the other thing is this is where people get this wrong. It's definitely true that he never had the vision of the game of like, once you get an advantage mid, you spread that to the map and you roam and you go and help someone else. You don't help the jungler in his game. You don't go help to the side lanes. He wasn't that player. But what people never understood was, he was never actually a passive laner. He was the laner, by the way, that everyone who was an NA player, for example, who played him in his latter days, said even at the end, if you played him on solo queue, he was the hardest person to play, because he would contest every single creep. Like, he would just be the person where he's going to get the CS, but he's also going to fuck with you as you're trying to get yours. And that actually, they said actually as a laner, he was very aggressive. He just wasn't the guy who roamed and spread it. So essentially, I do think people actually think this guy like sucked as a player, knew he sucked, and was just sort of scared under his tower the whole time. I wasn't who he was at all. I think that's such a... Listen, you can certainly dislike other things. Like I say, there was a period of time where maybe you should roam and spread the map. Maybe there were times where he took it to an extreme of playing like Vel'Koz, when he could have just played some like dominant, I don't know, fucking Echo or something in that era. But yeah, the point is, even though I can see the grain of truth, I think people took that one way too far, because they made it sound at the end like he just sucked, bro.
I think particularly when it comes to laning as well, he was really far ahead of the curve in regards to, it is actually in many cases better to force someone to back on low HP than expend your flash to kill them.
Absolutely.
Because if you're overextending...
Yeah, that's another thing, by the way. He's getting like the gold of a kill with no summoners spent as well. Think how big that is.
Exactly. And the stuff like, I mean, obviously... Everyone learned from Faker, right?
Yes.
In terms of the season 3 in regards to that. Because the special thing about Faker is that he did both of those things. He was one of the first players to do both. And you know, that era of Faker is so special because of that. But, you know, before that, like a year or two, you know, back in 2012, really, Froggen was the kind of guy that would kind of just, you know, get wave control in the right place. Where actually you have to overextend to go get his minions in the first place, because he's not like everyone else who's playing Lucksmith or whatever, just throw their skills at a wave and they just auto push it. Whereas he just last hit and suddenly the wave's on his side. Now, if you want to get the minions, you are not safe. Now, that's something which we still do now. That's still basics, fundamentals of it. And yeah, I think there are definitely arguments about how Froggen would transfer that lead and snowball the lead. And I think that's something which has increased year on year. I think every mid laner has increased that year on year. But funnily enough, you mentioned Bjergsen earlier, because obviously early in his career he was very solo kill dominant too, and then he became much more about that overwhelming pressure in the way that Froggen was. So actually, Bjergsen and Froggen were great analogs of each other at points too.
By the way, the ultimate irony, if you ever look, is almost every single great mid laner starts as the aggressive "I've got hands," just like junglers. And at the end, I made this point because at the time, as you say, they used to contrast for me, bro. He's stop being a pussy. He should be like Bjergsen, or you ready, or Jensen, or Caps. And they all end up as the Oriana main, mate, just playing that safe farm game, because eventually we all realise you don't want to gamble the whole bloody early game, do we? Like, eventually everyone learns that.
I think perception of every role has changed over time,
Absolutely.
but I think particularly in that era, people just took like not solo killing as a huge negative.
Yes.
That's a fair point. I think looking historically, there are a bunch of mid laners which just didn't get the value out of lane, and also didn't get the ability to just like get the CS leads, which he did.
Yes.
I mean, just on the Froggen thing, right? Like, so obviously, when you, like, as somebody who I was a coach who didn't play the game, right? So a lot of what I did to learn the game was basically just watching VODs, and we get these files called Roffle files, which are basically the in-game replays of which you can watch, right? And one thing I will say about Froggen is he always did so. I'll just give an example on Anivia, right? Anivia is a champion which scales really well, but your level 2, 3, you have like a massive power spike. Like you can burst with your, I forgot what the name of the abilities are, right? But you have like a lot of burst, and he would always toss that out very, very aggressively, because the way that Froggen kind of played lane is he would contest every CS, but his goal was to get you to like 30 or 40% HP, and then just have you just sit there in lane, 30 to 40% seat. And if you didn't base and you just stayed there at 30%, that was what he wanted, right?
I'm a mid laner, and it's one of the worst feelings in the world where like you're not safe in lane because you've lost enough HP, but you can't back. It's just the worst feeling ever.
But then it just gets worse, like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, you're sitting there, you're getting like 70% of the HP of the minions you can get, you're like farming, and that was his goal. So that was kind of his aggression. His aggression is like, play a champion, well, when he was on those champions, play a champion that has really high burst, level 2, level 3, hit my burst, and then like, just sit there and not flash it, because if you die, you're going to come back to lane on full HP. You're going to have an item thing. And if I can just trap you in this terrible situation of your own, it's your fault, right? But like, I'm the one who's like manipulating you, give you a chance, maybe let you think, if I just use these pots, I can sit back in the lane at 50% HP, maybe it's fine. And I think that is kind of the genius of Froggen, right? The genius of Froggen was the reason he got those CSs. I don't think he was efficient on his farm, but not efficient in the same way as Trophy was. But the way that he was efficient at like managing his opposing mid laner, and that's because he was getting a lot more minions because of that, because of how he was choosing to play that, and I think that's his genius.
Okay. By the way, I actually also think this is one of these topics we should put like in a folder, because we could run this one back again, boys. This one has legs. It could be its own show, basically, couldn't it? Like, there's a million players. Like, I was already thinking, if I was trying to pick one that'd be like iconic and would be a really strong contrast.
Well, okay, I'll give you some ones which I didn't choose. How the perception of broadcast has changed over time. People think that never cared about it. That's not true. I think about how people took such a long time to switch up on Knight and Chovy on whether they were chokers or not. About which regions were the best in the world. How close was EU to actually winning an international title back in some of the other points too? There are a billion different things. I'm like, was TSM actually a good team in 2016 despite not winning worlds? That's like 5 I can rattle off there. There's a million others.
Also, by the way, what you just said at the end there is also a very fertile ground, which is any time a team was really good but just blew worlds, they're treated as though they were never good, and they were always frauds. Whereas like we've had some of the best teams ever actually not win worlds. That's what's crazy about League.
Samsung Blue 2014, one of my very favorite teams of all time. They were the best team of the year. They just didn't happen to win worlds. Same with JDG 23.
Much less fun than Samsung White to watch, though. Like Samsung White were much more fun. No?
We talked about this the other episode. I'm not going into this again.
Actually,
well, my problem with that, Peter, is I will always have a bias, which is, even though I could see both sides of the equation, when you say Samsung White more fun to play, I just remember what's probably my favourite Worlds playoff series ever, the one against TSM, where they just completely shit down their throats 24/7, to the extent that the one game TSM wins is Samsung White almost says, let's just give ourselves an impossible draft and see if we can win with that too. And it's like, I actually thought that was... I don't think there's ever been a bigger gap ever between like a Korean team and a Western team, where like the West, that was like some, holding your little brother at arm's length while you slap his face shit. Like they couldn't do anything against them, mate. It was ridiculous.
Oh, God.
So I'm a little bit biased on that one.
That was the only game they dropped to Worlds, except RNG, no?
Oh no, they dropped some in the final to RNG. Yes.
Oh, yeah,
Yes, but aside from that, they dropped that one game, which, by the way, Peter, was because they drafted the scaling late game comp and still tried to all in early, which is like,
Dude.
God bless them. By the way, the sheer level of disrespect is legit. I love it.
Best win rate of Worlds was next year from 2015 SKT because they only lost one game in finals and they shit stomped everyone else.
Yes.
Although, funnily enough, there's some revisionist history there. One last little thing where people think that Marin was the best player on that team for a while. He gets his shit kicked in by Ziv on AHQ in the quarterfinals. By the way, go back and watch it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I always pick one of those. That's the one you want to put in the comments, right? Like if you're watching this, go put it in the comments. If you want to see Nymaera and I like argue about Samsung White versus Samsung Blue, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I'll dust off the boxing gloves. Never had any, but I'll get someone dust them off.
I'll say I had 2 more for this, but I'll save those.
Okay, we'll bank them. We'll definitely run this one back though. Okay, right. Let's actually do the viewer question now, because I also thought the viewer question, by the way, was an excellent one. It's another one that could be mega long, but we'll find a way to make interesting angles on it. So the viewer question was: what are the 5 role dynasties of EU, specifically a European league, and how have they been passed down over the years? So the analogy I'm going to guess he's making here, because a lot of these people, obviously people who watch my content, is I always famously did this thing that I do for European junglers, where I don't just treat like here's the best ones. I try to make it so the greatest ones are in like this lineage, which I just created. It's not a real thing. It's basically like it goes like Diamond Procs into Yankos into like, it depends who you want to pick. Could be Inspired, maybe now it's Skewmot, whatever it would be. The point is, it's like this is like the god jungler of the European lineage. And obviously in doing so, by the way, I'm being incredibly subjective. Like I've left out a bunch of great Cyanide doesn't exist in my world, I guess, you know. Fucking Snoopy didn't. I've just picked my own people that I thought were like the shit. I've also, if you notice, picked the ones where I tried to pick it so it was like for jungle specifically. I also picked the person I always thought like the Koreans respected, as well as was just a really good European and maybe had some international success. So if we do something like that, but for all 5 roles, obviously there's a lot of interesting angles we can go with. Which role should we do first, gentlemen?
I think the most interesting one's mid lane.
It is the position of Europe most famously, yes, of course.
And it had, that one's very interesting because actually one of the things which I was noticing when I was talking about this lineage was these lineages is actually how many of them were, because particularly the conversations today are about like, oh, but NA is losing its players to EU. Motherfucker, we lost so many of our key players to NA at the worst moments. So like, if you're talking about
the joke
like,
is when they do that thing, the LCS GOAT, they go, was it Bjergs and Jensen or Double F? It's like, only one of those is even a bloody North American. What are we talking about? What are we, listen, I get you in the region, but what are we even doing now, Americans? What are we doing, boys?
We lost like 3 or 4 like top tier mids over time, which kind of broke our lineage a bit. But in terms of the initially very good mid laners, I mean, you had Peke, Froggen, and Alex each are the first 3 which come to mind from them. But then after that, it's quite interesting who you kind of pick up and who you put down, because some players kind of came and went, because Alex each was the earliest of them to like bow out because he, Gambit kind of fell apart. Xpeke was there for a little longer, so he ended up on Origen. But then after that, you get some really interesting additions, because some of them didn't quite make the lineage. Like I was wondering at the time whether like Jez's might do it, because he was actually quite a cerebral player. He never quite made it in season 4. So I think realistically, for me, you have to look at season 5, which is where you get Febiven join the crew. And that's very, very interesting for me, because Febiven was, the guy on Fnatic that solo killed Faker. He was the guy that went to MSI and did a bunch of different things. And he ended up being very, very important, I think, to the overall kind of like role in a way that I think a lot of other players didn't quite do that. And the other player who took a little while to come online, but was really, really good, was Power of Evil. Yeah. And these are 2 players. I think Febiven and Power of Evil were like the next class of people that were really starting to make a difference in the mid lane. And I think the real tragedy for both of them is over different points in their career, they went off to NA. And I think that was a really big problem, because I think that actually broke. I mean, we were so lucky to get the next class of Perks and Caps right after
for sure.
Because if we had kept Perks, Caps, Febiven, Power of Evil, and they all managed to compete against each other on a good level, I think we would have had like a timeless dynasty. And we still almost had that. Of course, Caps is now timeless from present day to there too. But then like you kind of go through like 2018 to 2019 when you have like Febiven and Power of Evil either leave or fall off and things don't get so well. And in my mind, at least when I was looking through things, I didn't see like as many people I thought would do as many big things. I suppose I've missed off Nuke Duck, but for me, I don't know. Nuke Duck didn't quite make the list for me. I suppose you had like, Niski joined the lineage at that point. Because Niski, I think, does have to be on that list, despite the fact that he left again to NA and he came back, because he was just a very different class of mid laner. And so many of these people in this list, I mean, one of the things about this question is, which you would take a very long time to talk about, but it's very valuable, is like, how did they influence the lineage beyond that point? Because Niski wasn't the lane dominant player, but he came in, he was the jungle whisperer and someone that could like do some pretty crazy kind of macro plays like that. Jizuke almost makes it, but again, just didn't peak high enough for long enough beyond that point. Then after that, I suppose you got to go to like, well, at that point, is it Larson and Humanoid?
Yep.
Larson and Humanoid
Nemesis.
after that point? Am I? Oh, sorry, Nemesis. That's the big name I'm missing in there. There's so many names in this. Nemesis was the huge one in mid lane. And of course, Nemesis is in that weird spot because he peaked really, really high.
But he only had
he
2
was there at the
years.
same. Yeah, and then he was alongside Caps at the same time.
Yeah.
And they were actually quite good foils to each other as well. So you had like Perks, Nemesis, Caps kind of all hanging about at the same time. And then it kind of took Nemesis kind of like taking a step back, because obviously things kind of fell apart with the Fnatic rosters at points there. And then you had like the Humanoid, Larson, almost had VTO enter it. Almost.
Yeah.
But that's where things kind of like get interesting to me, because I think since that point, I don't think in the last few years we've really managed to add anyone to the mid lane pool. I mean, Jojo Pion is NA, really. Like, it doesn't really
Yeah, the
count in
difference
same
is
way.
we're not going to count him, and if anything, we're also going to say, while he is very good, that sort of shows us something to you mid lane. Unironically, he might be the best mid lane in our region. No, he's not even from our region, which I, again, statement no one ever thought we'd say about an NA player, but fair play.
Yeah. I suppose the one other person is Nuke. Nuke is the one person I think that could just about peek into it. He's had the horrid problem of just not being consistently on the great rosters.
It's why one point you're making
poorly.
here. By the way, first of all, obviously this is going to be the longest one because he was the mid-region, as you said. If you ever did that in the same way as you can do that whole, what if there was no Korean exodus for Koreans? There's another great one, which is Europe also could have kept all its talent. And as you're saying, mid lane would have been the craziest position in the history of League of Legends. We'd have had like 20 names or something. So one of the points you're making, I think, is a very valid point here is there are a lot of people where, because the first generation also had the international success because there was more parity in the regions, it's only really later when you get Caps and Perks who also had the international success, it feels like they get to be in the same pantheon. I know what you mean. The real problem, a lot of the other ones have the Power of Evils, the Larsons, the Nemesis, the fucking who was it we were just talking about? Nuke.
Febin was in there? Nuke, yeah.
These are also the people where it's like they almost made that cut into the top tier, but then they also in a way kind of didn't, and they also didn't have the same like length of time that they were elite, etc. I know what you mean. It's hard to make. It's the cut-off point's the harder part, isn't it?
Yeah, and like lots of these players influence each other in a lot of ways too. Like there are so many names I got on a piece of paper, and I'm just like, okay, this is just crazy amongst all of them. And there are some players which I think could have made it if they were competing against these great players for all those years.
Yeah.
I wonder what would have happened if VTO had a bit stricter competition at points.
Yeah.
I wonder what would happen with someone like Jackie's actually recently, where he's not bad. I think he's pretty good, but I think he could have been great if he'd had like the higher level of play. Because like right now we're in a really weird spot where we have Caps and we have Jojo Pion. Then beyond that point, there's a lot of inconsistency, which makes it quite hard to really see who's like in that top echelon. Whereas in other points, like even if they weren't on a top team, you could still have a top tier mid somewhere. Now, losing Perks is a big one, right? That we've talked about in different aspects before. Losing Perks is a big one. Nemesis not return, because Nemesis wanted to play on a top team and he didn't get those offers, right? And of course he came back for part of this year in a split. It's not really quite the same thing.
No.
But those are the names which stuck out to me in mid lane.
So, do you want to answer this one first, Thorin, or should I?
I'll give a brief one. I actually think you did a pretty good job summarising a lot of it. What I would even say is the reason the mid lane one's so interesting too is you can even do like stylistic lineages. Like obviously you can see a lineage between Froggen, Power of Evil, and Larson, for example. Like these are people who it's all about laning and matchups and what do I do in certain counter matchups, etc. And how do I lane in my own idiosyncratic way. Meanwhile, you have those other people who are like the aggressive ones. Also notice the sad thing about the EU one is even though we're going to give credit to Giorgio, etc. We should have been in a world where Jensen and fucking Bjergsen were in Europe. That would have also been super sexy, wouldn't it? There's sort of a gap where they're off carrying a different region, so they're not really associated with us. So I think mid lane's a banger, mate. I think it's the best one. Go on, Peter.
So the way that I kind of looked at this question is I'm going to use my Lord of the Rings analogy here, right? Like where you have like Rome reunited and Rome broken, right? And when I say Rome united, it's like when there's one like superstar that dominates, and then like when we talk about Rome broken, like it's like when there's like a competition and lots of people are kind of clashing, right? So I say you have the first era where you have Expected, Froggen, Alex Ich. I also add Bjergsen to that because his first season in Europe was very, very impressive. But I think that you have the first big set is Expected Froggen, Alex Ich. I then say it then goes into Perks, then goes into Caps. Then I think you have the humanoid Nemesis, Larsen, Abadage. Because they all came up together, right?
Abadage, he's on the cusp for me. Yeah. He was big, but...
But I mean, I think that Abadage is not a person I would mention as being like a top mid laner. I would just say that it's in terms of an era, right? Okay. You have the Expected Froggen, Alex Ich era. You have the Perks era. You have the Caps era, which kind of ebbs and flows. And then you have like the humanoid Nemesis, Larsen. You could choose whether or not to put Abadage into that. But humanoid Nemesis, Larsen era, and then we're back in Caps era again. And I think the problem that I had is I don't include Bjergsen, I don't include Febiven, I don't include Power of Evil, I don't really include Abadage as well. Because those guys all went to NA and they never really got the chance to establish themselves. But when I think about an era, I'm always thinking about I think that Abadage belongs in the humanoid Nemesis Larsen era because they came up together, but because he never really
So did you say you didn't consider Power of Evil there? So
for me, Power of Evil and Febiven, like if there was going to be an era between Froggen, Peke, so Expected Froggen, Alex Ich era, Gap, Perks era, Caps era, humanoid Nemesis Larsen, Abadage era, and then we're back into Caps era, right? And the reason why, I struggle putting, because we're talking about the lineage, right? The lineage of a particular role. Like for me, I don't really count Bjergsen its time in Europe, even though he was really, really good in the 1 year he was there. I don't include Power of Evil and Febiven because although Febiven had like a really good international showing and Power of Evil had a really good showing, they didn't really have longevity. And to me, that's...
Power of Evil had about 2 years. He did.
Did he have 2 years?
Well, 2015 on UOL was really good. He was considered the best part of UOL 2015 really. Yeah, and then obviously peaked back again with Misfits, right? Because they had that 5-game series versus SKT.
Yeah.
And so I actually think he had arguably 2 to 3 years of being.
I think his first year on FlyQuest was pretty good too. He had a pretty good first year, like in NA.
Yeah, but that's in NA. That's in NA.
Okay, that's true for this format. Sure.
Okay, fine. Okay, you kind of.
Because if you argue it to say someone like Alex Ich had season 4 was a weird one for him, but he had season 2 and 3 where he was really good. So that's 2 years. Because obviously at the early era of League, this is where the lineage gets a little bit weird, right? Because smaller periods of time with so much more of the percentage of the whole existence, right? So if you have 1 year now, it's not the same as just. We remember players who were just good for 1 year in season 3 or season 4.
Put it this way, when someone says now, because people still do it when they go, can Kerry be the GOAT? Has he had enough years? I want to go, bro, my boy Madlife had 2 years? Yeah, that's about it. At the beginning of the game, 2 years was a long time, though. Yeah, you're right. The problem in the modern days, everyone does 5 and 10 year careers now, so it means all the early players seem like they get kicked out of the conversation. I know what you mean.
Okay, then I changed my answer. So I think there's eras. So Expected Froggen, Alex Ich era, PoE, Febiven era, then Perks, Caps. I'm going to still count Abadage. I'm going to say humanoid Nemesis Larsen, Abadage era.
And then within your right.
Yeah, but that's my answer to that question.
Okay. I'll take a roll then. I'll do top lane. So the interesting thing is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a bit more harsh than Nymaera. And if people want, you can just add them in as we go or after I do mine. So I will pick the people. I think the first generation, realistically, is the one that is Wicked and Soaz, because those were the people who were just the shit. Now, yes, listen, if you're doing add people's name in, I have to say the name Darian, but to me, he was a meme. He was the joke is Koreans actually built him up to be and he had this amazing tech that he would buy the giant spot, but why would he do that? So he was just a fucking weirdo, mate. It wasn't. I had to explain to Monty it wasn't as cool as you think it is. Actually, he was just doing something lol, I do this, and it's just because no one else thought to do that, it works anyway. The point is, people like Wicked and Soaz were the shit in the early days. They were the only ones who could stand against Asian players, and they could do the different styles of play. Obviously, Wicked was the hard carry player. Soaz was the I pick everything and just play. The joke is Soaz's actual reputation later almost got co-opted by Wonder. It's the whole thing of he doesn't have to practice the game. He can first time anything, and every Asian player has to worry because he might just do something random and just fuck around in the lane and do so. So funny enough, a lot of what people maybe who were newer fans think of as Wonder was actually what Soaz's rep. Then you went to the era where, fully enough, similarly, because the Europe scaled down in terms of how dominant it was in the world, and then we had people moving to other regions, you then also got kind of like we did with mid lane, a little bit of a down period. That's when you got all the weak siders came along. That's when my boy Otto came along, LeBlanc and his partner Vizicachi. These were the two guys where their whole skill set was we stopped thinking of top lane as a carry position, and so you have to be the king of the weak side if you want to be in that spot, mate. You got to be in that spot.
And we never returned to carry top lane.
We basically didn't, because the joke is, bro, even when then later on think of these three names. You got Wonder. Well, Wonder was a stud at one point in time. When they put him on the super team, they just said, you're weak side all the time. And he said, okay, fair enough. You had Broken Blade, who I always thought was excellent in that regard as like a carry. But again, on some of his teams, I can tell you on TSM, they were like half the time, they were like, you're weak side, now you have to play the carry. And then the name that'll obviously always get forgotten now, even though he's actually still influencing the league, is Alfari. Alfari was trying to be like Froggen of top lane, wasn't he? It was all about laning and always being able to play from behind and all the rest of that shit. So and then we don't know yet on the next one. Like, I assume Naknako will be in it. He looks like he can be part of the next class. Who knows? The funny thing about top lane, by the way, unlike some of the other roles, is, if anything, the last few years is when top lane's becoming really significant in Europe. Hence why people like a Naknako can be a pure carry. You're getting the Mainters and the Tracens and all these guys come up. So actually, top lane's kind of become a sexier role. Anyone you want to add in there, boys?
From that point, I mean, after that, you got to go Bwipo after that, right?
I should probably put Bwipo in with the Wonder era, actually. Yes.
Yeah, because Bwipo was like a year or two beyond that, because he was kind of mixing both of them. There are people, again, who like almost make it and don't quite, because like Huni just blew out the entire ULCS for like a split or like a year, right? But he's only there for 1 year, so that doesn't really count. Broken Blade does deserve to be in there at some point. Obviously, there are people. There are some people who are almost in there again. I think of players like Zora Zero. If he'd stuck around for another year in the early year, maybe he could have made it in there. Besides that, though, most of that's pretty spot on. I think there's less names in the overall lineage in terms of the people like that's the person who I'm copying. I mean, again, someone like Adam almost made it there. Actually. He did again because he had one really bad year, right, and then one really good year and one kind of in between. Those are the ones which spring to mind.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think it's good to highlight the Wicked SOAS thing. You know, very funny. But the one thing I remember when I think of Wicked SOAS is like they did the 1v1 for who had the right to go to All Stars that year, which is famous part of history. If you don't know what it is, go look it up. They were so close in votes for the All Stars that year that they agreed, okay, let's do a 1v1 tournament top.
They had like tens of thousands of people watching them on Twitch. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was like the most. It was the most.
It was hype as well.
European thing so. I mean, I think that for top lane since that era, you know, Wonder maybe at his peak, but you can't. Wonder always has to be in the context of that G2 roster.
Absolutely.
And like Odo, like we had people that could do individual things really, really excellently.
Yes.
Like I think Alfari, Odo, and Wanda. I think goes in these Chachi too. But I think that the problem with Chachi had is that he never got to go to Worlds until like right at the end, which was like kind of a bit.
He was always the guy like dying in the regional. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas why, like I think Kabashard really does feature in that.
That's a name that's on the outskirts, certainly. Yeah.
I actually think Kabashard works for it because of that one Vitality year. Like in 20.
He was a stud, bro.
17.
Sadly, I think he also probably, because he did that comeback to the LEC, and it was so bad in KC. We've all deleted him from history, haven't we?
Yeah.
And then also because like he actually had some really good years in ERLs.
He was
where
a
I think
stud,
actually
mate,
he probably could have gone to LEC.
As far as I know, he just turned the offers down. Yeah, he just chose to play
because that was like the biggest years of Carmine Core's ERL run, and that probably did mean more overall. But then he came to LEC again. And it did disappoint. But he was around ever since like 2016 came up first time, something like that. He was around for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that top lane, like we've never since those kind of like we've had individual people who are like really great specialists. I think that's kind of how I see top. I think this generation of top is like the European golden generation, right, of top lane. Like I think that there are people in this generation that can really kind of change the narrative about them, which is because there's so many really talented tops, because top was blocked because people were like, oh, ERL success didn't really matter. Yes. And then you kind of get this talent building in top lane until everyone breaks through at the same time.
Yes.
And I think this is like, okay, Nak obviously is kind of already there, but having people like Canna there, so I'm not saying Canna belongs on this, but I'm saying having people like Canna there to push this generation of top, Canna and Broken Blade, like how Nak develops, how Tracy develops, how Mainter develops, Carlson if he ever gets back in, right? Like I think there's a lot of like really, really talented top laners now, and it'll be really interesting. The next 2 years, like I feel that in the next few years we'll have a champion of who won this generation.
Also,
and obviously,
you know when the kids say that thing, so it's like people have to understand Wonder had to crawl so that Knack could fucking run. That's what you have to realise, because the joke is someone like Nako doesn't even know the like privileged air he breathes when he walks in. When he walks in the room as a rookie and goes, "Pick me Yasuo in this game," it's like, what world are you living in? Like, the joke is Odoam there was actually a stud on shit like Jace. He couldn't even get it in the game, bro. They were like, pick the Maokai, shut the fuck up and let the ADC carry. Because that's another thing we have to add into this discussion, right? Which is, I noticed that period specifically for top lane where they all had to weak side was also where we had all these stars at ADC. So those teams, unsurprisingly, you load everything in the ADC. It's reckless, it's forgiven, it's fucking upset. These people at Hansama, everything's going into the bot lane, innit?
I have a really funny story about this, because last year, while I was on the LEC broadcast last year, and and one day, someone who was a coach for BDS Academy was in the studio, and that was Edward from Moscow.
Oh, right.
Ed was in the studio, and I talked to, I chatted to him, because Sam, my brother Sam's favorite team is Moscow 5, so I got his autograph and whatever. I don't get those privileges of getting get little things like that, and I did say to him, like, hey, there are these players like Mirwin and Narco, aren't they just like the spiritual reincarnation of Darian? And he had a good chuckle with that. He's like, yeah, I actually see quite a lot in that. So even though Darian, like, for me, he is part of the lineage, and I know he wasn't for you in the same way, and that he was a meme. For me, at least, he showed that you could do something different in top lane, and I'm glad that even though probably no relation at all, but like 14 years down the line, we've got some top lane players that can pull out just the weird shit again. So for me, the spiritual reincarnation of Darian, he makes it onto the list for me, just for an emotional reason. I need him on there.
Fair enough.
Okay. Right, let's do another roll then. Peter,
all right, Peter, you do a roll.
So I'm going to go jungle, and I think jungle is the easiest role of all of these, because I think that there's always been like one kind of dominant player, and my lineage is I'm going to go Diamond Prox, I'm going to go Trick, I'm going to go Yankos, I'm going to go Elyoya, and then I'm going to go Skumon. And that's my list.
Okay.
And I think in each generation, there's always been one person who the others all learn from, and who all like shape kind of the jungle meta in the region, and those are the.
Wait a minute, did you have Inspired there?
No, I don't think he was here long enough. I think Inspired has been like dominant in NA. Like, I mean, to me, Inspired is the dominant NA player. You could put Inspired in the
right. Fair enough. Listen,
but to me, Inspired will fucking hate me saying it. But to me, Inspired, he's been in NA since 22 now.
I'm glad you said it, Peter, not me.
Now.
Okay, right, fair enough. Okay.
Christ almighty, all right.
All right, give us some reasons then. Give us some reasons for those names then. Give us some flavor.
Was it 23 when he moved over? What was he? Oh no, it was Mallory in 22. You're right. Sorry.
Yeah. Like I mean, to me, Inspired is. I've got to be really. I'm going to trigger people. To me, Inspired is the best European jungler in terms of mechanics and in terms of game knowledge. But I don't consider it like in the same way that I don't consider Bjergsen a European.
Okay.
Like Inspired can come back. He's an insane player. But yeah, I don't think he had enough time in the region on like top team to really make his mark. And yeah, so why do I say these? I mean, Diamond Prox, I don't need to say.
Well, he's like in the global lineage of jungle.
Yeah,
he's actually one of the few players that actually makes like global lineage.
Yeah, and that unironically, Koreans would say, yeah, we copied him, which is like you can almost never say that for any other role. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think like Mickey, Caps, and Diamond are the only three that like I've had Chinese people come up to me and tell me that they've copied. So Diamond, I think Trick. Why'd I put Trick before Yankos? Because I think Trick came in. He did a lot of things. Playing with perks, how they played that mid jungle 2v2 that kind of shaped how European junglers thought about things, and the person who learned the most and who adapted the most.
So, funnily enough, he was the first player to ever get 2 MVPs in EU. No one had gotten the second MVP before him, so he actually hit a milestone there. People are really overlooking. That's a really good call.
And what Peter's saying, I can tell you, is accurate. If you ever talk to people like Perks and Mithy, they're like, "Oh yeah, the Trick guy is what sort of taught us that way of playing." So in a weird way, even though he had nothing to do with it in the game, he's like the spiritual successor of the G2 Super Team. You wouldn't have Perks and Yankos playing that way if Trick didn't exist.
Yeah, and then obviously Yankos speaks for himself, and then I think that basically I think Skumon has. So I put Elyoya there. Purely for longevity, I think the Elyoya inspired argument would have been much more interesting if Inspired hadn't gone to NA. I think like you can have that argument over internationals, and you can argue about how they did.
Also, you have that detail I'll always bring up with Elyoya, which is no matter what you think of Elyoya, he has one of the most gangster stats of all time. I think he's won like 4 LEC titles. He's never played with caps ever. Yeah. He didn't have caps and perks. He just did it on his own, bro. Like everyone else, remember, goes, well, how am I supposed to win caps, wins them all? He didn't. Apparently, there wasn't a problem for this guy. He won all the other ones, didn't he? He's pretty good.
Yeah.
Fair play.
And he did it like the quality of player that has won with Elyoya, I would argue, is even lower lower than the
unbelievable.
quality of player.
Especially, here's the thing. Obviously, the first one was pretty good with Human, but you look at the ones where it was Mad Lions, where they hated each other and they lost every scrim game, into the more recent Mad Lions ones. These are like, he's probably had the greatest min-max success career of any European, mate. It's crazy, yeah.
Did you throw Yike in there?
He didn't.
No, I don't throw Yike in.
He didn't. He got power of eviled. He power of eviled him.
Yeah, I power of evil. Like, I really don't. If Yike goes and wins 2 titles with KC, like then
With 3 episodes in, we're making new terminology.
I like
Wonderful.
it.
The show's a hit.
I'm gonna get flamed so much by KC fans.
Oh
Okay,
god!
fine,
I tell you a player who I actually would add in there a little earlier, because this is a guy that gets overlooked, but I think he peaked really hard, was actually Max Law. If you remember Max Law, back in because he was the guy that broke TSM in the tiebreaker.
Sure.
On Misfits 2017, right? He fell off super hard. Don't get me wrong, he fell off super hard, but Max Law in 2017, 2018 actually was a very different kind of jungler. So while you still had Jankos around in crazy form, and that was just before Broxer came in, and obviously, well, Broxer was a bit strange, because I don't think he was individually as dominant, but he worked well within that team. I'm not sure I'd put Maxwell completely in there, but it's actually worth a nod, because he did some really inventive early jungle pathing. Because I remember how he ganked top in that tiebreaker versus TSM. He was a very ambitious player. And they ended up playing very different style in 2017 Worlds, because they couldn't play Enchanter supports. He went full Ivan and allowed them to play the Leona bot lane, which ended up being... Anyway, it's just innovative. I'm not quite... He's, again, on the cusp, but he's worth a mention, I think.
But I mean, I think if you put Max Law there, you have to put Xerxes there. Xerxes was the best Ivan in the world, best Trundle in the world, and best Kiana in the world, right? And I think it wasn't... I mean, the thing I'd say about Xerxes is he was the best jungler in the world until something went wrong. And the
way that I phrase it is he's a plan A player. If it goes to plan B, there is no plan B.
but there were things that he could do that we consider standard today, because he was the one who innovated Rumble jungle as well, right? I think he was insane on those innovative picks. The problem
that actually raises a question about Kikis jungle as well, and that boils my noodle, because Kikis in 2015 around because he was the initial Unicorns Love jungler, so he's actually in there at some point too. I mean, again, the problem is for EU jungle, you're absolutely right, there's one mega jungler pretty much all the time, and most of the time that was Jankos. For a long time.
Also, notice if we were making a stylistic judgment, we've mainly picked out the junglers that were they also were masters of macro, or they had a massive influence, sometimes a captain's influence on their team. Whereas if you think actually in the tradition of Europe, because Europe was so much about style mid laners, we've had a lot of dog junglers that their job was just follow the mid lane, do whatever he does, mate. So unfortunately, a lot of those people don't get to have their name in the list. You have to sort of be a little bit of a battlefield general, I feel to be the guys with. It's why if you notice at the end he picks Skumon, it's an obvious pick, isn't it? He's the guy. I always tell people now, even though Cap's actually, ironically, he's very good this year, he's having an excellent year, that's Skumon's team now, and they sort of get it within G2, I think.
Yeah, I think Skumon's fantastic. You tell you what, there's actually an interesting person I just thought of too, who's, again, doesn't count for EU, but Sven Skeren, if he'd stayed in Europe, he would have been on there.
He had the inspired thing. If he'd have stayed around a few more years, maybe he could have been there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's another player who you think, probably could have made a name.
By the way, he actually, here's what's funny. I'll give you another example where the same narrative gets repeated and attached to a different player. What everyone says about people like fucking Blabber, etc. No, that was literally Sven Skeren. He was the guy where you didn't have to ward because he was in their jungle the whole time. So it's he was the moving ward pro. And also, you didn't need to know where their jungler was. He was fighting him. He was just fighting him over a camp somewhere. That was actually, unironically, a really good start. Because if you remember, he used to play with Enrated. Yeah. And I can tell you, Enrated was the guy who, that's the game plan. It was right, but we're going to see on the map where they are by where you're invading them, and then we're going to know the timings and the pathing and shit, yeah.
And then Amazing slots somewhere in there too, right? She was in NA for a bit, but Amazing and Svenska. I mean, at least he had the Origin year, right? Yeah, Amazing, right? So he's again there is people who are definitely in the fabric of it, and they probably did inspire a lot of people. So people Amazing, Brox, players like Max Law or Kikis, just in different ways, because Kikis, the creativity. I think that Amazing was actually a really good Gragas, for instance. He was one of the best Gragas in the world. God, even players like Trashy were actually pretty damn good for their time at peaks. He was really streaky, his off button was really bad. But Jungle is definitely one of the ones with more nuance, I think, because there's quite a lot. There's quite a lot in the first jungler, and then the second through third, they have specific strengths, but they don't stand out quite as clearly.
So I've kind of got a follow-up question then to that, Nymaera. So obviously the top jungler, the Yankos, Illuria, Skuma. Well, I mean, you can argue with it, but let's say Diamond, Yankos, Illuria, right? Does Yike belong in that lineage with them, or is he like an honorable mention, or is he does he belong in the successor to Yankos?
I think Yike does. I think he does personally. I mean, the way that he just completely ran the league. The person I think is actually more interesting, is more borderline, is Razork. Because he was actually very good regionally at points, and then just has had these awful collapses in playoffs and internationally to the point where I'm like, well, yeah, everyone knows him regionally, and you do mention Razork in conversations, and he probably has inspired a lot of people, but realistically, he is a rung below Elyoya, inspired for his time, and now Yike and Skumon. Razork has sadly found himself on the second rung of that. Unless he has a breakout, one final last hurrah or whatever, he probably won't be considered in the same level.
That's fair. I think that's fair. I think for sure Yike belongs a tier above Razork. But the tragedy for we talked about Razork 2 weeks ago. The tragedy for Razork is he should have been in that lineage. He just
100%.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, some of that I don't think shows it well. Right, we've got 2 left. We've got AD carry and support. Which one are we taking?
I'll do support. You do AD carry. Go on then.
Cool. Right, AD carry. Because actually, this is one which I don't know enough about Season 1 to tell you accurately, but there's a lot in Season 1 that Europe probably does have to put down there, because there were players like, well, Yellow Star was an AD carry at that point, and he hit the cross-map Ash arrow that is the one highlight clip from that final. So that one's a really important one in there amongst things. And then after that point, again, Season 2... God, Season 2, I wasn't there to tell you who inspired all the people. So you do mention people like Yellow Pete and Genja, right? But I don't think EU would really come online in terms of its AD carries well and truly at that point. Yeah. So while there are a lot of people, because this is a really important piece of context here, the laning style that we have, 1 top, 1 mid, 2 bot, was called European lanes back in Season 1, because they used to play that style, and that was a really big part of that. So I mean, I suppose for the early years you kind of have to take I don't know, Genja and Yellow Pete, and then obviously Yellow Star ended up switching away, so he's in a bit of a weird one. For Season 1 he's in there, but not really for the other ones. So outside of that it gets a little bit weird. Then you get into way more interesting stuff in around about 2014 to 2015. We have a lot of people who either made it, who are just on the cusp. There are people who are just on the cusp, like Tabs. If he'd had one more good year, would have actually been very good. He was great on Alliance, particularly in summer 2014. Players like Mr. Rales was on a bench in TSM for forever. He probably could have made it at some point. Candy Panda was, again, too much of a bit player. But you are left with some really fucking good AD carries at this point, because you have Forgiven and Reckless. Yes. Season 4 is just all about Forgiven and Reckless. And that's when actually I think, you were talking about the weak side top laners coming through. I think it really started with these two AD carries, because actually it was, look, if you give resources to Forgiven, he will explode a game, you're done. And Reckless was such a good kind of ticking time bomb that you pretty much could always guarantee that he would be a fact at some point into the game, although he'd take a little bit longer than some of their other ones. Going into Season 5, God, you almost had players like Woolite, because he was there in 2014 as well. But I don't think Woolite makes the cut, because he's one of those guys that was so mechanically gifted, and then just would in the worst possible moments once a game. Freeze is one of the greatest tragedies of EU.
The borderline player, yes.
I think he's a borderline player. Freeze should have been in this list. Yeah, he was actually up there with Forgiven. In fact, there was a team that was subbing him in and out, right? And then Freeze had H2K, and then he ended up getting Carpal Tunnel, right? Freeze didn't get Carpal Tunnel. Yeah. Funnily enough, his twin ended up coaching Fnatic, right?
Yes,
yep.
Yeah, so he was in there. Now, this is one which I need your input on. Does Hjarnan, over the few years he was in there, actually count? Because he was such a bit player.
Problem is, it's that Darien factor, in it. He's kind of a meme is the thing. Remember, his most famous champion's Heimerdinger, for fuck's sake. Bro, forgive him that, studs on Caitlyn, Reckless says he's fucking whatever, a million champions. But yeah, give me a break. He's on fucking Heimerdinger, mate. Fair play. They did beat RNG. I'll give him that.
And he did beat RNG, and he actually played really well that series. But I think that So I think I'm a bit harsher with people that belong in the lineage, but I would say that Hjarnan is kind of an honorable mention, because there were 2 years where he, Perks could... So Sven and Mithy went to NA, and the first choice Perks had to replace them was Hjarnan. right? Like Hyanan because when I went to when I joined Splice, like obviously all the guys were leaving, and there's a world where Kobe leaves, and Hyanan was the guy that we were like looking
Right.
at to enable kind of a roaming sport. But there was no question, like he had been earmarked, for G2. Like you have this brand, the brand, it's like don't touch this guy, like in the way that G2 had a very smart, it's not quite mafia style, but it's like you don't want to waste your time there, like when they're talking to other orgs, not to the players, like they put the arm around, they have the pool party with the players they want to recruit, and then when they're talking to other orgs, it's like you don't want to waste your time on this, like it's bad things may with the implication bad things may happen if you do. And Hyanan was one of those guys that got the like pool party brand,
Yes,
not brand, the champion,
yeah.
So I do think he deserves kind of an honorable mention in that regard.
Right. And then obviously you mentioned a guy in there. Sven is like well and truly in the lineage, even though he went off to NA later. Sven was like he was such a big part of EU play, to the point where like he overshadows another name which like is not quite there for me, is Kobe. Which I don't know, yeah, like Kobe, he deserves like to be on the fringe there, right? Because actually, he was one of those guys that was actually very, very good, like every so often. Now, the weird thing is actually like Hans Sammer is in there and he starts quite early, but I don't actually think he qualifies until much later.
No.
Hans was actually quite inconsistent.
For me, it's when he got to Rogue was when he started to matter,
Yeah, exactly.
Because obviously he had the failure in NA as well, which is kind of a black mark at one point.
What, Hans started in LEC in 2017? Something like that, right?
Yeah.
2017, something like that. And he probably took him about 3 years.
I can say as well, he was a way more raw player. Like, by the way, when he first began, he wasn't even a particularly good laner, believe it or not, which would probably shock people now. Like, he had to level his game up a lot, Yeah,
and then after that, I think we have a bit of a delay until we get, like, Patrick and Upset? And Patrick is, again, like, he's in a fringe scene where, like, Patrick is not... Again, one of those players.
Notice how there's all those players. Here's what's cool in history. If we ever had more time, we'd expand this out. There's all these players where actually they were the rival of someone else because the other player took off and they didn't. They're forgotten because, as you say, like Power of Evil was supposed to be like a rival of Febervan. Someone like Patrick's supposed to be the rival of Upset. These are supposed to be the next Forgiven and Recklesses, etc. Freeze should have been with Niels, Sven, etc. But the problem is when one goes on and has success and one doesn't, one tends to get forgotten. And so I know what you mean. I bundled these names together. I know what you mean.
Yeah, and then like the timing. Sorry, Peter, do you want to add in there?
No, I mean I just say that that when he was sheriff and he was on H2K, that was a tragic H2K, and he was like 1v9 literally every single game.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he does. No, I actually think I just remember the sheriff. He does actually deserve to be in there, and actually Patrick.
And he was also on that Vizzy shit. He was the guy who just had to play every year. They never go to fucking Worlds, wasn't he? At the end of every year, he'd be like fourth or something. They'd be like, "See you, we're off to Worlds. Enjoy, Patrick. See you, mate." Like,
okay, so we mentioned Hans Sammer, Sven, and then we have like Upset and Kazi come within about like a year or two of each other, right? That was around about your like 2019 to 2020 kind of era. When did Kazi come into the
2020?
Yeah, and he got up there pretty damn quickly. I think Upset got there a year before he was 2019.
I just like to imagine the world where Peter went from the insane copium he had for Kobe to he just got Kazi, bro, the most balls to wall motherfucker of all time, who's just going in. Like, I'd like to note the contrast with like the whiplash must have been crazy, Peter.
I mean, I'd say that actually really similar. Like, I think so. This is the biggest Kobe, the biggest Kobe copium, but I think the Kobe and Kazi team fought very similarly. Like, they're super aggressive players in team fights. The difference is Kazi was super aggressive in lane, and like Kobe was, he just wanted to not.
Someone who's on the fringe is Crowny after that point, because he was there from 2019, and like he really became way more noticeable on like the BDS 23 roster, right? When actually he was like he would have like the Crowny oopsie once a game, where like he'd just be out of position and lose the game, but he would be winning you the game up until that point. And like he probably does just about make it in, probably, because that 23 was really important. He's a very different, he was pretty big at that point. And then after that point, I mean, you almost get Unforgiven, but he was only here for a year. Oh, sorry, the one person I've missed is Comp. Comp actually does deserve to be in there. I actually missed his name. Comp actually does deserve to be in there, because he fell off hard. But actually, he had a couple of years where Comp was actually legit fucking good. Like, he was really good at points. Like obviously peaking in 22, and they obviously beat G2 and Malmo. And then has anyone else come up since? Oh, then we've got like,
Achilles. Yeah, I mean Achilles.
yeah, and then we've got Callista, really. And then Callista's like the one person like, okay, wow, he really is actually.
He's in the
making it run
knack-knackle thing
already.
where it's like, he is going to be, but we just can't 100%. They have to have more time, you know. You've got to give him a bit more time.
Anyone else
I mean,
would
Super?
chuck in
Do you want to
there?
count Super?
I wouldn't put him in yet. No, I don't think he could get there, but I think Callista's closer there than Super. But
Why are we
it's-
putting
it's worth
Spanish
a
Kobe
conversation.
in here, Pete? Why are we putting him in there? Let's just leave him.
Spanish Kobe is Flacken, no?
Oh, okay, true. Yeah, in a way.
Flackett's a player that's on just like Flackett was very interesting because he actually was so interesting on like the G2. What was that? The 2022 roster.
Yeah.
He was really interesting there
the
with his versatility with Targamas, but like the heretic stuff was not good for his perception. It really made me feel like he had like that one season and then like everything else kind of went a bit tits up. So yeah, now we have like Callista's like the guy in Europe, and we've still got the continuation of Kazi. I think those are the names I put in there. Like I added in a lot of caveats, but realistically, you know, like we had those hyper carries right in the early. Well, we had like the defining parts of the roles. We had some hyper carries, and then it started to diversify out a little bit beyond that, and around about 2016 to 2020 is when it really kind of like that kind of speed point in time where we started having like Reckless and kind of a couple of the other players kind of like starting to spar off with them.
I mean, I think the problem with AD Carry is that AD Carry in Europe has been disrespected internationally. Like, I mean, you had Reckless and Forgiven who were respected, right? And then nobody, even people that I think were unfairly put aside, like Freeze, you know. I think if you talk internationally, you're looking at Reckless, Forgiven, and then like maybe Kazi.
No, Sven was pretty well respected.
Oh no, Sven.
I think Sven
okay,
was.
Sven too. Yeah. Okay, so Reckless, Forgiven, Sven, and then like. It's really until the modern day that you have like people who are properly respected again. And I mean, you know, I think Kazi was under-respected. I think Kobe was under-respected. I think Upset is under-respected, right? Internationally. But you know, people don't rate these guys.
Put it this way,
highly.
when you consider how many championships Hans Sama has won domestically, I don't think he ever really got that straight. The joke, remember, Forgiven never made an LEC final, but it doesn't matter. If you go ask a Chinese player, they're going to give him a stud,
But the reason why is that my barometer for are you respected internationally is do people internationally think you were better than Pucks at AD Carry? That's my barometer.
Okay.
Because I was haven't talked about Pucks in this list, right? But I think that if you ask like the average, you know, like informed Chinese analyst, right?
Yes.
Well, I just mentioned because that's the they will tell you that there's maybe only 4 AD carries that they respect more than Pucks today, which are Kalist, Sven, Reckless, Forgiven, and like, you know, maybe some of them will like Kazi, but only if they're like big LEC followers, right? EULCS followers, right? They're not going to rate Comp, they're not going to rate Sheriff, they're not going to rate, Patrick, they're not going to rate Crowley.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah.
Even though maybe they do deserve it, right? Because it's the international. The problem is that you don't see these guys, you don't see the domestic play, you don't see Sheriff trying to drag this H2K corpse across the line, right? You only see the international, and that's why that's kind of the additional context. But I do think we mentioned most of the top EU AD carries.
Okay, on to support, I guess.
Right, for this one, again, this is one of the ones where you have to remember, like we were just saying about ADC there, also depends on the role and what era we're talking about. Because at the beginning of the game, unsurprisingly, there was only a couple of relevant teams. So it was people like Edward, Gosu Pepper, Crepo was in there at the time. If people don't know, Crepo actually gets a little bit hard done by because later in his career, he was kind of whatever. And he obviously more famously became an analyst. But actually, people have to remember, when he played with Yellow Pete, that was one of those scenarios. That's like some career play with Gumayushi stuff. Like, that's a player that's got, Yellow Pete was considered more of a limited like ADC who just scales and then wins on the champion basically. Crepo wasn't in the position to make crazy ballsy players and do all so. I can tell you he definitely had like decent mechanics. He was a guy who could have played differently with someone else. Then you go to the era that was people like N-rated was actually like a captain figure as well if people don't know it. But I always think that SK was basically just him and Sven Skera and a bunch of like Phil players. Like that's even a forgotten team. That team was technically number one in a ULCS at one point in time. Obviously Yellow Star swapped famously role swap and actually actually had so much success at support. A lot of people don't even know he was an ADC before. At one point in time, Yellow Star was seen as like the captain of European League of Legends. Like the guy could make anything happen. Like, funny thing is, now people look back, they'll see those rosters, they'll see Febervin and Reckless. Yellow Star was the dude back then. Even though it was even the perception was like, look, here's what's forgotten. In that year, the split where they went 18-0, fans now will go, well, Hooney ran the EULCS. Back then, the perception was, how the fuck did Yellow Star? Remember in the first split, he had Steelback. How did he get these randoms? Like a Febervin who'd never been in the ULCS, a bunch of Korean rejects, and then a fucking nobody ADC from France. People viewed that as like a miracle. That I can tell you, that 1 year is why TSM literally just gave this guy like a blank check, like, please join. Although the irony was they thought he was joining to be a shot caller. He thought he was joining to go, I'm done with that shot calling stuff. That's why he had a terrible time there. Then you go to the obvious two classics. Also notice in all these discussions, one thing that definitely helps you in all these lineage discussions is if you had your era, and it should have been, then we go to the next one, but you're just there forever still. So in the same way as actually an underrated thing about Upset is, he came along halfway through and he's still here now. Similarly, if you are Mickey X and Hillesang, they actually came along a million years ago, guys, but the point is they were just so great that it's only recently anyone thinks they even dropped off. They were actually both in the LEC last year, for fuck's sake. Those two guys, what's funny about support, and this shows you how different roles were valued differently, is beyond like maybe a bit of Edward, because Gambit was just a phenom at the time, I actually think Hillesang and Mickey X do stand out. They overshadow everyone before and after in their role, because that was the one era where, as Peter's saying, those are two players where I could tell you, I'd have to think who it would be, but I can tell you I've talked to notable Koreans and Chinese people where famously they actually did for Hillesang, his nickname was the Professor, because they had no clue what he was doing, bro. When he was making plays, they weren't just going like, what an idiot. They were going, again, they were doing the Monty with Gambit thing. There must be a level of genius beyond this, though. And I want to go, you need to meet Hillesang, bro, and speak to him, because you're going to realise it is genius, but it's unspoken, mate. He's not conscious. He couldn't describe to you what he's doing. And then Mickey X, I always thought, actually, for a while, was stuck in the shadow of Hillesang, even though I always used to think, bro, it's the same game and skill set. He just doesn't have as sort of as outgoing a personality in a weird sense. So I think actually it's only once they got past the perks period. Because by the way, I agree on the perks one. The reason on the ADC one we didn't put perks in is I've always told perks, I said, mate, the miracle is this. You were insane when you played ADC. You just didn't play ADC. You just played in the bot lane and then did what, like that was just like where you started the game and then you went and did whatever you wanted. I said, the genius of what you did is you never had to learn the bloody role, mate. And also, hey, don't worry, he does know that he also caught the craziest timing of all time when he came in on the Zaya Kaiser era or whatever, and then he fucked right off when Aphelios and all that came out, which would have been like, and Senna, that would have been the nightmare if he'd had to stick me. Luckily, anyway, he dodged that one. It's all good. Not that his career went much better after that. Whatever, he did dodge that period, so he gets to live forever as an ADC god and never have to be tested on the real bet. So then similarly, after Hillesang and Mickey X, listen, it gets a, I forgot one name before them, Vander. I have to obviously put Vander in there because he came out.
I actually was going to call that out. Yes. Yeah, he had the longevity.
He sort of he had longevity, and he was like a connective tissue for me to this era, you know. And then here's what's funny though, boys, even though we have some pretty good supports now, it's a little bit harsher because after that period of time, you have to go to like what? Labrov, Trimby, Alvaro, like these are good names, but they're not quite Hillesang and Mickey X level, you know what I mean? Like, or at least they have to do a bit of work. Because I do think for support, this one's the most overshadowed entirely by Hillesang and Mickey X. They're now go to those positions.
Like EU support peaked in about 2015, where we had like Mithy and Hillesang and Yellowstar.
Yes.
And like in the early days, you know, like I agree with almost everything you've said. I mean, there's like a question mark on a couple of people. Like Ignar was pretty good for a while in like 16, 17, around then. Yeah. Kaiser almost made it, and then whenever he was disconnected from Kazi and Elgoy, he just fell apart. Turns out, yeah. I think historically,
face on that one element.
Yeah.
Whatever, it's whatever.
I mean, just knowing how like how like the shot calling works with Elgoy and Kazi and Humanoid. Yeah. Like, Kaiser was literally just a puppet.
Yeah, of course.
Like the guy was actually really good at Rel, but like this is actually one of the big problems actually within support. And actually, we've talked about this a lot in different contexts, which is about, because we talked about this in regards to Razork and Blabber just the other week in terms of, well, you know, where's the structure in the game coming from?
Yes.
Now, you go back to 2015, we did have, you know, like Mithy, Vander wasn't bad, but you had Yellowstar, you had all these players still hanging around, and then Mickey eventually came out too. Well, Mickey's a little bit weird in terms of the structure. We don't have those players that often. This is the one which I thought of the least names for.
Yes.
And realistically, we have maybe Alvaro making it now.
Yes.
I don't. Yeah. I mean, Trimby had like one really golden year. Maybe
isn't he the one that I always felt like he's like the failed genius, though. You know what I mean? He could have been in that like Mickey X Hillesan category, but for some bizarre reason, at this point in time, by the way, there's no coherent story if you ever ask the teams. But there's just something that teams get the ick when Trimby joins for whatever reason. Who knows why? And the worst example ever being that Fnatic did what I still think is the worst trade in the history of the LEC.
Oh yeah. I forgot about that.
I tell you what, can I? That's like some like ripping a kid off in the playground on Pokemon cards. Can I have your Holo Charizard for this basic Blastoise? Like, why were you when they traded Advienne for Trimby? By the way, Advienne wasn't even in the league like a split later. I think we never heard. Is Advienne even alive? No one even knows. Like that's one of the worst.
Advienne is a lovely guy.
Like, how much did they hate Trimby that they did that deal, bro? What even is that?
Look, I've actually talked to Adrian a lot personally because I hung out with him a bit outside the game, and like he's a lovely guy. I doubt even he knows why they did that though, because like, I mean, that was just such a weird decision. I'd forgotten about that.
It's mad,
God, that's brought back some memories.
So mad, though.
I think the problem though that if Trimby had the career that he's had as like a top laner or as an AD carry, he would have a bit more respect. Because I mean, he won a title on Rogue. He was decent on Fnatic.
He saved Fnatic when he rejoined. Is when they got good again, mate.
Exactly.
Then he was even on the fucking what do you call it? What team after that? Oh, fuck. What was he on after that?
I can't remember.
He's on Heretics.
He was on. I can't remember.
He was not bad on that team. He was even decent. By the way, he even got a bloody Brazilian team when in theory, and he was supposed to steal their slot. He's got him in the world. He's got him on VKS. He was on that team too.
No, but I mean, like what I say is on Heretics. On the one split I work with him on Heretics. I mean, he was good on that split. And then on Keed, he literally has changed support in Brazil in a way that Trick has changed support in Europe.
Okay.
Changed jungle in Europe, but we don't see it because nobody watches LEC.
True.
Oh, he was on Koi, by the way, when Rogue kind of like changed over to them, and that was like the weird thing he was on. So technically still Rogue, but Rogue under different colors.
So it's ironic, but I think that Trimby is more respected in Brazil than he's respected in Europe. And the problem he has is that he has Hillesan and Mickey above him and preceding him in the order. I feel Alvaro it belongs there at this.
He's going to get there eventually. Surely he's going to.
I think he gets
polish
there
the rough edges off and get there.
The list is so short right now, he kind of is there just by virtue of, like, who else is there?
I'll give you a little spicy teaser as well, because people haven't thought this through. What no one's really thought through, because we're still doing the soap opera of, like, Merwin and Super get a second chance, you know, and they can stay. What people are forgetting is the actual success of Jojo implies they don't have to be Spanish anymore on that team. So I'll tell you where Alvaro gets, like, boosted up in this list in, like, 1 or 2 years. What if his next ADC just, like, is Upset or Hansama or something, boys? Like, if he gets someone like that, then that is the time where his name can blast off completely.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, to me, just looking at the list, the thing that I think is that impresses me the most are the players that were able to reinvent themselves over the years. And to find, like, I mean, we talked a lot about the lineage and a lot of these star players and people that have really high peaks. But the people that impressed me, like, really impressed me when I was doing this, are people like Jankos. You know, Jankos playing Lee Sin every single game and into finding.
Hey, he was the Elise God in 2014.
Yeah, exactly. Into like becoming a Sejuani player, into like the Heretics team that wasn't that good. Yeah. Sorry, playing Wukong every single game to like.
But it's the idea you go from the First Blood King to like the carry, the cover jungler. Is like what? Yeah. Like that's some bizarre shit. Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, the people I really want to call out are people like Jankos, people like Hansama who reinvented themselves, and the thing that will allow me to like make a proper assessment on Alvaro is whether he is able to reinvent himself. Because right now it looks like he doesn't know how to play range sports in any sense of the word. Right?
Exactly.
Like, he looks absolutely tragic.
The enchantment meta is his main enemy right now. Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. So if he works it out, then he goes in the Hilly Mickey. Okay. And it doesn't mean that he has to be able to play those.
No.
It means like he has to have a pocket blitzcrank like Labrov has to be able to come there. And that's what will put him in that lineage at that scale to be.
Yes. Okay, there is one we've done. Like that's another topic we'd also explore because obviously we could do other regions, couldn't we? So pick your favorite region, we could do it for another one, right? What about? And also, by the way, the real based one. Don't do it immediately, but down the line, just someone do this. Like, just pick the LPL. We can go so hard on that one. Sadly, half of you are going to be no, but it'll be mega. Don't worry, it'll be so self-indulgent. Right, the last topic of the show is Peter's. So, Peter, what is the last topic?
So this is a wider discussion topic, which is we've had a week of a month of like interesting roadshows, right? Like LCK did the experiment when they went to Vietnam to do their roadshow to kind of like expand the league here, and we've also had Europe for the first split, like for the first time properly, basically handing off these roadshows to teams I mean, they did the last bit as well, but like for this year, there's an experiment where they are handing off these roadshows to teams, and it looks from the outside, at least in EU, as like a massive, massive success. Let's be clear. These games that happened in was it in Madrid at the Koi home stand?
We had both Paris and Madrid. Sorry, there was one in Barcelona as well, which is just outside Barcelona.
But these games this last weekend, it was one of the most insane weekends of LEC that I've seen. But let's be real, like all the teams were already locked for playoffs. They just played for seeding. Like these games don't.
You
really
could even see how they
that
drafted, bro. Like KC wouldn't draft that way in some of the other games. I know they were fucking around. They were fucking around.
I mean, they were fucking around in the GX game. But
it was hyped. You're right.
It was massive and massively hyped for games that really just.
Yes.
In competitive sense, didn't matter that much, right? So I guess my kind of topic, which I want to open up to wider discussion, is what we've seen, the success of what we've seen in LEC, and kind of the mixed success, like the LC. For people that don't know about the LCK Roadshow, there was interest, but the problem is either through ticket touting or through like they set it about 5 times as high a price as people for the local economy, and basically a lot of fans boycotted it, and therefore there were like a lot of fan boycotts online, but there was a lot of interest, especially for Gen G. Like so I guess my kind of question is, will we see this as part of the wider ecosystem? Like, is there a possibility for something like this to happen in NA? Is there a possibility for this to happen in more of this happening in LCK? And obviously, I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but obviously this is something that they've been doing in LPL for like a decent amount of time, right?
Funnily enough, actually, yesterday, IG just opened up their own new arena, actually. So now we have 5 team arenas in LPL where they play their own home games.
Yeah. And that's in Shanghai, right?
Yeah, and then there's a rumor basically that the neutral venue of Shanghai, which is basically where everyone plays if no one has a home team, it'll just move to the IG stadium instead because they actually own the building instead of renting it. So yeah, obviously we've got a bunch of different regions. LCP is in a very different scenario right now, so we can't really talk about that in the same way in depth, I don't think. So apologies to the APAC fans out there. I've got a few I'm going to ask about them and see what's happening with like the live event there, because they've tried to hold things across different regions really. But yeah, obviously in LEC, I think the roadshows have been seen as a huge success because we had last year we had like King of Madrid, which was like just a weekend of regular season games, and it meant something because it was in front of a crowd. And I think that this is a lot of people have started watching since about 2022, 23. I mean, we've now had since COVID 6 years. People forget that every finals used to be a huge thing, and it used to be the fact that the reason you couldn't beat like a Caps or whoever your big name players was because they just were better in stadiums.
Yes,
and Caps is the big stadium player, and then when it kind of came back to like 200-person arena studio, it felt like he was actually beatable again. And there were caveats really because I mean I think it's affected everything. I think that the styles of casting changed because like you're playing less to live arena. I think the style of play changed. I think that a lot of what people valued in players and the whole broadcasting experience changed too. Now we're finally getting back to those roadshows, and as Peter said, in a different way, with it being more kind of backed by teams, which kind of shows maybe financially the teams would take it on themselves, but actually if the ticket sales are good, they take kind of more the profits. There's more, more investment, potentially more reward for them too. Hopefully it signals a bit more of that kind of pre-COVID era of esports, which for those of you who weren't around for it, it was a wonderful time in terms of like the live arenas. It was fantastic. Back when Worlds was in Europe in 2015, had an awesome time like going between different cities and stuff. And live events for internationals are always a big thing, but even just having like a road show for LEC on the road, or EULCS back then, was a really big deal at kind of engaging local fan bases. For Europe, I think that works very well because we've kind of tapped into the national fan bases. There are negatives to that, but it does mean you get a lot of engagement coming through there. Even teams like Giant X, when they went to Madrid last year, they basically said, we didn't know we had fans until we turned up, and they just had like a whole section full of them, which is fucking crazy. And that's great in its own right. So I think on an economic level, I'm not sure how it works internally, whether it's subsidized by Riot or whatever broadcast partner they have, and then the teams put it on themselves. Obviously, KC and MKOI have held some of their own arena events before. KC doing like their own, KCX and their own kind of roster signings and stuff like the roster announcements, which are really, really cool.
There's done a lot of off-season stuff.
Yeah, so that's been really cool too. It does strike me as a bit worrying that it's only those 2 teams doing it. I would imagine not many other teams could get the draw for it, or they don't see the reward is equal to the risk, or they don't have the skills in house. Like, the biggest team in the league is G2. I'm not sure where G2 would hold it, and if so, how would they produce it? Like what expertise do they have in house rather than reaching out to figure things out. Doing a live event for the first time is the hard bit, because Casey and MCO had already done it. It gave a much easier way for LEC
to be more explicit. When you say that, Nymaera, you also obviously mean because Kometo and they by themselves are huge streamers, therefore they already have the tech people who could just expand out and do the event, right? Whereas you imagine someone like G2 would be bringing someone in to do that. They don't necessarily have that same capabilities. Right?
Yeah, because obviously the local broadcast is basically just the co-streamer there too.
Yes.
So you're basically tuning in for like, this is chat now. The arena is like all of these tens of thousands of people which watch them too. Doing an event the first time is the hard bit, and even then, I mean, the first time they did the event for the roadshow, it's not like there weren't tech issues. It's just that there was such an atmosphere they just didn't. It didn't matter, and that's the big thing about the roadshow. The thing which is interesting to me is like, will this ever expand beyond just KC and MCOY? Now, I mean, they're the ones which are capable of doing it now, and that is a good thing. Like, they should do it because they're capable. Well, I think it's good they can do it, but my worry is like, how do you even go beyond that to introduce other teams so it kind of brings some different locations onto the board? Like, will we ever get a London roadshow? Will we ever go to like Amsterdam? Will we ever go to like, other big kind of like big kind of cultural hub cities or anything like that? Will that change? Because that is going to be the next big step for LEC if they want to walk this forward. But for now, I think it has been a big success. People seem to be excited about it. It's a huge change from, like LEC playoffs is all happening in studio. I understand why, because you can't guarantee which teams are there, and you don't want to have the hosting team not be there for half their own damn event. I can understand that. But for LEC, I think the initial steps are good. In terms of the plan for the future, which I think is part of the spirit of this question too, and what it means for the ecosystem, I think it's a good thing. I also wonder whether this will incentivize Riot to just go online and then have roadshows anyway. Maybe that's a plan for the future. Maybe not now, but like in a year or two if they want to wind things down in Berlin, because let's be honest, Berlin's kind of been... I don't think they've built the esports community in Berlin very well to make it a hub for esports. It's just the place where the games happen. It's not like there's a thriving local community here. When there are people, but it's not as explosive as Paris or Madrid or Barcelona or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there's a couple of things on this. So the first is the profitability. So Adam Adamu who's the I don't know what his exact CEO or something of Overactive Media, who are the people that are in a partnership with. I don't exactly, but when I was on Splice, they were the people that owned Splice and Mad Lions. But basically, he said that they needed 7,500 people to attend to make it profitable, and they got more than that, and they were very happy, and it was a profitable weekend. The other thing is that Overactive Media have a lot of experience running these events because of the Overwatch League, because they had to build that experience because of that.
Which team did they have? Was it Toronto?
Toronto one, yes. Defiant, I think they were called. Defiant.
I can't remember Overwatch, but I believe Toronto. But basically, they have a lot of those people in-house. KC obviously have tons of people in-house because they've been running these events. I will say that as somebody who's attended a KC event, there were growing pains at different points, but they've learned a lot, obviously, they've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, right? And they're now probably the best at it in the West. So I mean, I think that those two definitely have the experience. The problem is that the advantage of those roadshows, going to places like Rotterdam, going to places like I can't remember where all of these places were, but there was one in the UK, right? There was one in Spain, there's one in Sweden, there's a bunch of places. You got to like build your fan bases rather than like kind of absorbing additional fan bases. The problem is, if you have these events at just France and Spain, maybe they'll be profitable, but you're not going to grow a following. And
you're not engaging your fan base. Actually, just tapping on this real quickly, because I just remembered an event, because back in 2020, there was it only happened the one time, but there was a thing called NeoSurf Cup. And this was when XL were partnered with Twickenham. They were partnered with England Rugby, and they actually could rent out some of the rooms from Twickenham, not like the whole fucking Twickenham Stadium, but for those of you that don't know, not big into rugby or anything, Twickenham is like the whole of English rugby. And,
it's basically like, Wembley for rugby.
Exactly. Like I'm a Welshie. I spent a lot of time in the Millennium Stadium. Whenever I went there, god damn, it was like enemy territory. It absolutely was. But there's something very special about kind of like having those connections, and that was when... That was, I believe, XL were there. And then NeoSurf Cup was effectively just a show match best of 5 between Misfits and XL in early 2020. Okay. And I had only just started... In fact, this was or maybe end of 2019, maybe. And that was where I met a lot of people, because I went there. And I ended up meeting so many passionate people who... I think it was very telling that the people turned up to those events eventually went to work on an esports. So I was there. A bunch of people who got involved in teams were there. My brother was there. There's a couple of people that we ended up doing LGL with. He went on to work with both Raya and ERLs too. People who I would say have had like a decent amount of success within the scene. And like I feel like we've missed out. It would have been so much easier to do this again about like besides the national teams, right? I think that MCO and Casey have made it easier there. But I think a lot of other teams, because esports are kind of been winding down in terms of spending, and we don't have as many of those partnerships. We don't have as many of easy things to tap into there in terms of those kind of events. But it'd be very interesting to me now that roadshows are on the table, whether teams will start looking for those partnerships again purely for live events. Actually, can you partner with a venue or someone who owns a venue to give you like just some outs that way? Because maybe some big sports teams or whatever just want to have like an option to hire out their venue for another day.
But it's also a question of finance, right? Like how much, when you can do these shows so easily, like, and this is the thing which really scares me. You can do these shows really easily in France and Spain. So why not just keep doing them in France and Spain instead of like subsidizing?
Yeah,
let's say in Germany, they can only fill a 3,000 person arena, right? Are you ever going to do an event in Germany? Well, okay, if you're not going to do any events in Germany to grow your fan base, will there ever be a point in the future where Germany will ever be able to get, right? To be able to get an event. And like for me, the tragedy about Berlin is that a lot of decisions that were made basically kind of killed the German fan base because, who did the majority of German fans support? Besides like Fnatic and G2, it was Unicorns of Love. And Unicorns of Love didn't make franchising. And those were like Unicorns of Love before franchising.
And then
I will tell you those guys.
And then kind of went hits up to
Fear Our Horns, and like they would always be the most represented fan base, And
well, that's why Roman started off too, right? He was like their kind of like their cult leader almost.
Yeah. And I mean that's to me is the tragedy. But I'm really scared that the success of this weekend will mean that we're going to centralize more into France and Spain.
Right.
And that's great for French fans and great for Spanish fans, but you can't just have an LEC with two fan bases.
Well,
right?
it's still better than it just being Berlin.
It's better than it being Berlin.
It is, but here's the problem. We're actually going to end up, though, in a scenario where it's not one or the other. Like, the implication is it'll just be online, except when you do these homestands. So it might be no Berlin, but online, which is worse. But then also, even though it's better for cost cutting, but then only you go to these venues that are like that. Because, by the way, I'll tell you that I'll tie this to the last topic. I'll tell you the other reason why Abedage doesn't make the list. Because the knock on Abedage always was he's a choker. Then he got the 2 years where you played in a studio every single time, got to win championships and make a fight. He never played in a bloody arena. He was just in a studio still. Essentially, you just sign up and start. The hypnotism joke would be, right? You hypnotise yourself that you are in the group stage. He basically was. They just called it the finals. And he got to win the championship.
He played a final in his career and it didn't go well. And he played against EG and Jojo.
There you go.
Had his number
Enough
on
said.
that day.
I will say. That was baby Jojo. That was fetus Jojo. That wasn't even the guy now who's really good.
But I will say that so massive success. So like let's be clear, massive success. But I hope that they make it like they don't go 100% France Spain. I hope they go like 60 or 80% France Spain, and then they like use some of that budget to like expand it.
Sure.
Hey, I just want to see an LEC event in London again because it's just really convenient for me. Basically. Hey, MSI was great there. Worlds was great there. They've actually, I think they even there was even like some political consideration. Maybe like Sadiq Khan or whatever was like saying he wants to like enable some more esports stuff in London. I mean, selfishly, I want them to go to like the NEC or someone outside of London for once because goddamn, London's really expensive to live in and get to. But the question is, look, I think it is a good thing these roadshows are happening, and like obviously we wanted to talk about every single region here, and I think that let's kind of compare this to NA in this case because there was. I think it was some tweets going between Mark Z and I think it was Ash Goyle talking about it.
Okay.
About like, well, why is the LCS studio shut? Why are we playing games with no crowd and stuff like that? And I don't think people realize how much it costs to run a studio for a day,
especially in LA, bro. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's like so like if you're running without front of house and security, and you'll have some security on form anyway, but if you're not hiring the extra security for the crowd, and you don't have catering, and you don't have other things which are specifically there for the fans, and a bunch of other things like that too, it's still probably going to spend about 40 to 50 grand for a day,
easily.
About that, because you've got some highly trained specialists on their job in terms of directors, cameramen, makeup artists. You have lighting, you have EVS, you have observers, you have different kinds of directors, you have writers.
Put it this way, you know, when you just said that, cameramen, I'll give you an example, because at one point I actually got to work on American TV in Counter-Strike. There's a type of camera that people have seen where it looks like you're almost like in some sci-fi movie. You know, it's like a huge one in front of you. That is a specialized type of role that you have to like train to host that camera where you had. And basically, I heard those guys get some crazy, like, you know, like 10K a day rate or something nuts. Cause it's like some specialist. Sure. It's not like a random guy you just handed a camera. So small thing. And by the way, the other thing, like you're saying, things like security also cost a lot. If you have to run security all day long and have proper like metal detector, that's not cheap. That's not like a few $100s, guys. That's thousands of dollars a day. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's not like minimum wage. These are like trained professionals, absolutely. And you want them to be, right?
Yes.
But I mean, in terms of like LEC production room, there's got to be like a dozen people or more in there, and all of them have got to have, you know, you got to pay them, right? You got to pay them, and like that's just for running it without the security. Now, obviously, running that, so that is kind of agnostic of. That's agnostic of security or just in-person considerations. But you know, some of the comments were effectively to the tune of, can you not make back your money by selling seats? And the answer is, when you're selling them at under like 30 quid, fuck no. Yes. You are nowhere close. Even if you sell out every day, which you won't do for mid-split particularly, you'll sell it for like first week and last week, and then everything else in between is like, if you have a really hype matchup, you will do. You mean, even if you sell out to like 200 people or whatever, spending whatever, you're not even getting it's.
I always tell people the real problem everyone has almost economically as a consumer is you have to know the specialist considerations of each field to know what actually a fair price is. So the example I always give in esports is people want to, for status, be in the same sort of stadium that would have like Taylor Swift in, but the Taylor Swift ticket would cost £500. It wouldn't be like 40 and then we bitch about it being 40. Like it would be 500 and it would be like 3 hours, by the way. It wouldn't be like a 7-hour event like we're doing. So the problem is our margins are so off traditional sports and media that we have a really hard time making them balance out. Yeah, absolutely.
When you mention that too, there's actually a thing called blue dot fever happening right now, which has been a phenomenon which has been cropping up in this like last half year or so, which is effectively, I think since COVID, venues lost so much fucking money to cancel tours because hundreds of tours and hundreds of days of venues had to go silently. Venues have gotten really strict on who they're letting into venues and how much they have to sell. And Blue Dot Fever is effectively, if you go on like, you know, like your Ticketmaster or whatever ticket site you go onto, it's the blue dots for available seats, and they're just not selling out. So there are actually quite famous artists who just cannot fill out big venues anymore. When they would have done, you know, 6 years ago, they would have done. Even, you know, like there are like bands which, like Motley Crue is a band which is still doing tours, and I know they're from the 80s and the 90s and whatever. But like, I mean, God's sake, I mean, like the first gig I ever went to was Deep Purple, and like while they were around in like the 70s or whatever, they still sell out or were selling out crowds now. I'm not sure many bands, even from nowadays, right, who are slight, you know, even if they are timeless or whatever, a lot of big bands who used to make that cut before wouldn't. So this is actually not just a league thing. This is also just a lot of different venues across the world right now are really hard to fill out. Now you're in like Titcher Esports with very affordable tickets, which is great. I think these tickets should be affordable. I think tickets should be affordable for most kind of live entertainment to stop it from being gatekept from you know, the rich and powerful. Make sure that people can see the arts and stuff that entertain them. It does affect our society. You know, cultural stuff aside. I mean, if you're talking about LEC and LCS and stuff like that, it's really hard to put on live events in the current culture right now when everyone has less money to spend. People are spending less stuff anyway, and venues are harder to rent than ever. By the way, so I think that's actually an important aside.
One thing you bring up here as well, you alluded to it before as well, is another thing you can do is I can tell you it was something like just over 3 years ago, because I remember it was before we had a major in Paris in Counter-Strike, where actually Macron himself, look, obviously he didn't do it, his secretary will have written the message or whatever, but he did like a tweet basically where he said, and did a speech where he said, I actually want France to host all the major esports. And then this is how I know he didn't do it. He even name checked like the CS major, the international in Dota, and the League of Legends World Championship. So he knows what any of those things are, but whatever. The point was, the reason the gesture was significant was when you say that as the government, you're also sort of implying, and we'll grease some of the wheels to make it happen. Like if you need a stadium, maybe we help you out with like, I don't know, you don't have to pay a license, or we give you a cheaper thing, or
visas is a huge
there's another one. Yeah, we ensure you'll all get the visas to get in the country, whatever it might be. So that's actually an angle that's actually an underrated one for people. If people hate how the government spend money anyway, like in the UK, famously, we have the national lottery, don't we, that they spend on all these initiatives. creatives. Then put some of that so that we have an EULCS LEC homestand in Wembley or something. That would be cool for the UK, wouldn't it? Like, beyond just like self-indulgent reasons, there's a way we can spend what funds would be wasted on something anyway to something that we all want.
Sure. No, I agree. And I'm just on the Macron thing, when he did the tweet, congratulating KC for winning EMEA Masters.
Yeah.
Right. Clearly they had somebody in the office who was very interested in esports.
Well, at least they had the finger on the pulse. Fair play.
Yeah, maybe Macron is just a diehard.
Yeah, right.
Fan,
okay.
Maybe. But I think France is a special case on this because France have a special cultural budget that is used to promote the French language.
Right.
So if you sing in French, there's a certain number of radio slots that have to be filled with songs being sung in French in France, and some of this budget.
Also, if people don't know, the reason you actually can't complain when they have the homestand in France and the in-house is French, I believe it's even the law that actually in-house comms have to be French for this reason you're saying, Peter. Yeah.
Unless there are specific exceptions to it. I think maybe there was a CS major or two that were in English. I can't remember.
Okay.
But there is, by law, it's the same in Spain and places too. Basically because of the nature of globalization and a merging of all cultures.
Sure.
Languages have been kind of bullied out by English, which has happened in a great many places over time. I mean, I can understand why, but it does affect esports and live events of all kinds too. Funnily enough, I think it's Norway which has I think they use their North Sea oil fund to do stuff like that too. They're just not involved in. So they actually funded a roller coaster or a theme park ride at Disney World. That's what they ended up doing.
Okay.
Some countries just say, you know what, we're going to put something here. We think it's a good investment. People will know more about our country. And there's Maelstrom in Epcot is done by the Norway public whatever public investment fund it is. They've got a similar thing.
So what you're saying is, so they put lots of money into chess because of Magnus Carlsen. We need the next caps to come from Norway.
Exactly.
So right, go and invest.
Yeah, by the way, if there's anyone we need to call out, where the fuck are the Danes? You had them all. You had Bjergs and Froggen and Caps. Where are you guys at? You should have been balls deep on this. Exactly. What are you doing?
But I mean, I think it's interesting the thing that you mentioned in the NA, because I think the NA ecosystem kind of complicated right now. I think the problem in Brazil is that Riot Brazil, all the teams are excessively happy with how Riot run their live events, right? When they do things in a stadium, it's really, really well done. So I think that makes Brazil complicated. I think that China has this system, where lots of teams have their own home things. I didn't realize
it was what Overwatch League was meant to have, really.
Yes.
Yeah. And not every team has it, but I would say that if you've ever been to one of, ironically, if you've ever been to the RNG home studio, that studio was really, really nice.
Right.
Pretty expensive upkeep, probably cost them in the long run. But that venue was super, super nice. I haven't been to the IG venue, but it's worth saying that the owner of IG is son of the ex-richest man in China. I don't know where he goes on the tier list now, but one of the biggest property developers in the whole of China.
So basically there are 5 teams with arenas now, and IG are the 5th of it. So we have, and the big thing is China's a huge place, and every city is very different. So traveling to Shanghai is obviously not possible for a whole bunch of people. So you have WE in Xi'an, that's where 23 finals were held too. So that's the old capital, and there's a lot of cultural stuff there. You have LNG in Suzhou, and NIP in Shenzhen. So NIP obviously Swedish organization, right? But they have a huge presence now in LPL. You have what's the other one I'm forgetting? So you have and JDG in Beijing, so that's the capital. The problem with their arena is that it's very far outside the city, so it's hard to travel to it, but it's a huge venue, and that's a really cool one to do. And then the new one is IG, which is in Shanghai, and the special thing about that is that building was meant to be, I believe, a place for Blizzard Esports to be broadcast from, and then it went unused. So it was so then what they ended up doing is just basically buying the building and completing whatever needs to be done there at huge personal expense. Basically, the IG owner was saying, this is the worst investment I've ever made, in monetary wise, but I just wanted to do it for the hell of it, basically, which has been a thing which they've done before. And now effectively, there was a rumor, I think it was either someone on Weibo or someone talking about on stream. It might have been Crisp talking about on stream. I don't want to misattribute things, but there is a rumor effectively where basically they're saying that the neutral studio in Shanghai will just end up going because they don't want to pay rent on it, and they'll just give it to IG instead. So the neutral match will happen in IG's arena instead, and it can always be improved. Right now they're using folding chairs. They'll get nice chairs at some point, stuff like that, right? So now you have like 5 different locations, which means that every playoffs is held in one of these locations, so they'll have it there for the entire time. Special place, like the grand finals at the end of the year, they'll be held in a much larger venue for like summer, which is a bit special, a bit larger. But it means they have 5 different venues they can go towards, so it caters to 5 different parts of China, which are far apart from each other, very different places. So, for instance, when LNG kind of got knocked down to the lower group last year, they still sent some of the top teams to play. So there was a BLG top esports game played in their arena, despite LNG not playing either of those teams in the split, just so they could cater that. WE in Group Ascend, they hosted, because the teams have to travel to location, they hosted like a full 3 days in Xi'an, despite, you know, W not being part of those games too, just 2 weeks ago, I think it was too. And it gives them a really good ability to be like, keep costs at level, not exploding, have consistent games in these arenas so you still have those skills around, and then still cater to different parts of the audience as well. Now, nowhere's going to be able to do that like LPL, and it's no point really doing it in LCK because everyone plays in Seoul, and Seoul's such a huge part of their kind of cultural fan base anyway. But in LPL, it specifically works very well, and nowhere can really replicate that.
Yes. By the way, I can tell you the reason why in Korea they sometimes go to Busan is that's just because everyone goes for like a beach weekend. Like the joke is everyone's traveling from Seoul to that event. They're not waiting in Busan. Like, yeah, I know what you mean. I've always said, by the way, that's one of the greatest, most exaggerated things about Korean esports. Like, it's bloody Seoul esports. You know, not like, again, I come from the UK. The UK has mainly, beyond like the odd thing in Manchester and Birmingham, it's basically London esports. Like, spoiler, the area I came from, there's about one other person ever was even in esports in the Northeast. Like, he was just a caster in CS vaguely. So like, there's no one, mate. So another thing as well, by the way, another reason why we need it, a bit like the Abadagi angle, is because I also want that as well. I don't want to. One of the things I think so tragic, because I come from other esports games, but watching League of Legends, is I have to watch these players. Think about, as we said earlier, people like your Upsets and your Visit China, who took years to get to Worlds. That means, by the way, you don't even really know if this guy will choke under the big lights until he's like 5 years into his career. That's crazy if you come from another game. Like, you need to have these people, so like every LEC final hopefully is in like a big stadium with a massive crowd and the big, you know, the lights and the big, and here come to the stage, because that alone is what gets people. Like, there's even a thing they did in Counter-Strike, where even though they've now abandoned that venue in Katowice, they're now in Kraków, actually, in Poland. One of the cool things the ESL did in Counter-Strike, I thought was epic, was they put it, because Katowice was like one of their flagship events for many years, they put the winner of each year on the steps as you walked up to go to the stage. So if you were in your first final, as you're walking up, you're seeing, wait a minute, like Fnatic, like, you're seeing all the legends of the game. That's dope. I want shit like that. I want more pressure on you when you're on the stage game. And I'll tell you why. Because think of this last homestand. Doesn't it make the player so much sicker when not just Callisto's like a penta, when he stands up and does the pop off, which is what we obviously have in CS and fight. Everyone wants that. That's the iconic moment. You want to have that memory for the event, don't you? I think shit like that's just dope. It's one of the cool aesthetics of esports, isn't it?
Sure. Like even the like, I mean, the thing that made the weekend awesome though was it sucks for the fans who like wanted to watch a show match, but the fact that they cancel the show match, like, oh man.
By the way, that's actually like Peter. That's actually a rare misstep, because here's where I'm disappointed in those guys is that they actually weren't making enough fake drama. It was real drama. I thought the whole thing was going to be some kayfabe shit where they were going to come out and be like, "Of course, I wouldn't really let you guys down," and then they just like, "What the hell is that? Is that Camelo's music? I thought it was going to be that." I can't believe in the end it actually was a real drama. They just didn't want to have the match. Like, what? You idiots. The whole business is having drama with each other, then playing the matches, isn't it? Come on.
I mean, like,
that was the biggest layup of all time.
I mean, for me, this makes EU more fun, because this drama is drama you get in Brazil, like,
yeah, of course.
All the time, right?
Oh, by the way, Peter, you even know this better than most, because if people don't know, one of the original mad fucking hype games in League of Legends wasn't a big game. It was when they used to hold the international wildcard qualifier and Turkey would play Brazil. Those stadiums, I used to say, that may as well be like the Roman Colosseum baying for blood, bro. Those were crazy environments.
I mean, especially like you go as a Brazilian team away to Turkey.
Of course,
you genuinely don't feel you're leaving that.
No.
Like, I mean, like, I cannot. And you know, right when Turkey came to Brazil, it wasn't quite that hostile, but it was pretty bad.
Sure.
It was like it was KC, you know, fans.
Of course.
And like, I mean, the drama you get, like, you have like to give an example, not this split, but last split, the last split finals, like the support on the winning team had some beef on with Twitter with the other support, and he literally brought his medals and like.
Oh, I love it! I love it!
Like, he got 4 titles, and the other guy hadn't won a title.
Yes, I love
and,
that shit.
Stuffed it in his face, and I was like, oh,
exactly. That's
well,
why.
remember, Brazil is the region of like the guy with his bicep with just like bot gap on it. Like,
true.
Exactly.
Was that Brunser? I think it was.
It was Bruns. It was Bruns. Yeah. But this is why I love Brazil, and the fact Europe is getting it is good.
Yeah.
But you know, like, but obviously it's centralized in a certain way, right? So we talked about LPL. The last region that I kind of want to bring on is LCK, right? Because obviously when we talk about a more mature market, we talk about LPL and we talk about LCK. And I just wondered if you had any opinion about what LCK were doing, trying these international homestands, because there's a lot of controversy in conventional sports. You know, you have the NFL. I remember the NFL did like a game in England and these kind of things. So
I know there's been like some conversations about like the Six Nations holding games in the US as from Rugby Union. A lot of people want to hold sports matches. If they're in the US, they want to bring them to like London or somewhere in Europe or to the Middle East, or if it's in Europe, they want to go to do something in the US as well, because they just want to tap into a different consumer base. But there are a lot of controversies you mentioned, because at the end of the day, particularly for sort of like Premier League match, you don't want to see a Premier League match played on the fucking stage, because it's meant to be for your local fans.
Exactly.
Like that's what you're meant to be doing for those kind of things. With esports, it's a little bit different, right?
They have the charity shield. So for people that don't know, it's like the champions of the league play the champions of the domestic cup. I think it's the Serie A. I think Serie A.
They have the Super Cup, it's called.
Yeah.
Well, they have both. I believe in both Spain and Italy, they have the same thing where it's like the cup winner plays the league winner.
Yeah, and it's same in the Premier League, but the Premier League is done in the UK. But I think it's Italian or the Spanish one is done somewhere in the Middle East.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it's in Saudi Arabia. I don't know if it's in Dubai. Right. But my question for the LCK thing is, obviously visas are going to be difficult for LPL, right? But for LCK, like, do you think we're going to see more? Like, do you think that there'll be, in your opinion, do you think there'll be an LCK game played in Europe? Do you think there'll be an LCK road stand done in the US?
I mean, by the way, you could even imply, bearing in mind, one of the craziest things about English language viewership is for LCK, it only seems to get bigger. Like, actually, the joke is everyone's become some old, bitter, jaded fucking boomer in CS, so they only want to watch LCK now. So, no, actually, if anything, they've got sort of a foreign home crowd, as it were. I think if you had T1 play Gen G in a fucking homestand in Europe, bang, mate. I think you'd have the full stadium.
Well, didn't Arnold from Gen G, or was it Papa Smithy, said that because we talked about this on Summoning Insight, right, Thorin, about because this was when I was on there at the end of last year about Casper Cup. Because Casper Cup, I'm pretty sure the numbers which the LCS owners or the LCK owners got given is something like 30% of LCK viewership is global. Like a significant chunk of it. And I know that there was an owners meeting at some point this year, and again, this is talked about probably not leaking anything or anything, but they said that one of the biggest avenue which LCK wants to go towards in regards to the LCK is Vietnam, because Vietnam is a huge market, which is why they held the things in Vietnam, and they held A finals in Hong Kong, right? Too, right? Yeah. So they've tried to do. So they've done Hong Kong, they've done Vietnam. Is there a chance of it going elsewhere? I think because of most of this comes down to economics, right? Yes, I think there has to be a chance of that. Now, there's going to be questions about the logistics of it. You've talked about visas. There's travel plans. There's a lot of red tape. I think there would be, particularly because LCK is such a international league, it would surprise me if they didn't look for at least weekly regular season games like that for just 1 week going over or weekend going over to those parts. I don't know, and I don't have an ear close enough to the ground to think about how the local community would react if you had a lot of finals being played outside of Korea, because I think at that point, that's when you start getting a little bit touchy with it and says hang on, this is still
that was basically what people didn't like about the Hong Kong one. It was if it just been a game, it would be fine. But it was the idea of it. This is our finals, though. What about me, the fan who's the Korean fan? By the way, along those lines, assuming you, like you say, you don't make it the finals, you make it just like a big game, basically. I also think an obvious complementary angle that ties these topics together would be if you were T1 and you were having a homestand in France, just have like KC come and play a show match afterwards or something. Exactly. Do something so it adds so there's like a double value for the fan to get the ticket and you get to see Faker, Anchovy, and then you get to play a match against MCoy or something ridiculous. Yeah,
but I mean, for me, the reason why this is in the back of my mind is I think it's a positive, right? Like, I think it's a positive if there is an LCK game in Europe, but I don't know if I'm in the majority for
Right.
that, but it's just, I've been following these developments. The thing that frustrates me is that it didn't go as well as it could have gone in Vietnam
Okay.
because of the boycotts. Now, I'm
Yeah.
not saying the boycotts were not justified, right? Like, from what I understand, the ticket prices got spiked really, really
Sure.
highly. But I wouldn't be against like seeing an LCK game in Europe. I think it would be good for building hype, for League in Europe.
Okay.
I don't think it would take away from European viewership in the long term. But yeah, that's just what was in the back of my mind, seeing these things. Right. Firstly,
Yeah.
how can we diversify our audience away from France or Spain? Again, not saying that you don't want to have the majority in France and Spain, just, I don't want 100% to be there. And secondly, what does this LCK experimentation mean in the long term for Western audiences seeing live events, right?
Also, to me, if the viewership is this crazy in English for the LCK finals, then if you are the teams like the G1s and the Gen G, you start to think, well, let me sell some merch to fans that are in France or Spain, or let the guy who doesn't come to Seoul on the pilgrimage, as it were. Like, what about that guy? If there's actually an audience out there, maybe I want to connect with them. Also, there's the world where then you can get international sponsorships for things that you want to do. It's all got its own value. Can all build in. Because again, notice with those things, this is, if people don't know, even though they're now going to both tell you MCoy and KC, no, we're making profit on that. Listen, there's a lot of creative accounting in esports. There's a lot of things where you want to be perceived as being, that's irrelevant. They could actually be losing money because if they do it the right way, those particular orgs, they're viewing that as like a fan building exercise and it'll have complementary value for sponsor activations in the future. Essentially, you're investing now because it'll have extra value later. It doesn't have to itself today pay for itself and totally justify itself. There's a way it can build in other things, which is also why I agree with Peter. The other real, actually, like, canary in the coal mine is, will G2 just never ever do anything? Because if they're just going to sit and do nothing and just be we're the number one team in the league, that will imply to me that they're lacking something, like we're saying, they're lacking some logistic component. Maybe they don't have a dedicated fan base that they believe they can capture more. So I also want to see in the future, if this model works, surely eventually people like G2 also find a way to get involved and have their own.
Yeah, for sure.
Then obviously, like, I know we kind of like touched on NA already. That's the one which I find a little bit more difficult because, look, I think like the LA audience, people don't already kind of struggle to turn up towards the LA studio stuff, which is again why they did do that. I understand why they started, de-incentivizing kind of like, or like deprioritizing NALCS stuff over Valorant for a couple of things that they've done. I mean, the big thing for that is like the Jinxie tournament, right? Where there is still interest in League if you get the right people involved. And this is something, I've mentioned this a fair amount in the co-streaming kind of debate about actually, I think there's real power in getting huge figures from elsewhere into League, even if it is just a 0.1% conversion rate. If you get people interested in turning up and watching League from one event like that, which has like a crazy like 800,000 peak, that's lightning in a bottle. That probably won't happen.
And here's the thing, mate. NA also, this is where NA can sometimes be silly. What you've got to do in any region is look at what you already have. What resource do you have? NA has all the giant streamers, the variety streamers, like you say, it's XQC or something. They already have all those people. So you may as well, the joke is, why try and build up a non-existent League thing when you could just, people would actually rather watch XQC play the game probably than Doublelift now. That's just reality.
I mean, we know this because they had the Jinxie, is that how you pronounce it?
Jinxie,
like they did a streamer tournament where like they had people like every team had a pro or like a top tier streamer.
Yes, you had a challenger player in every role, but they were forced to play support on a limited amount of champions. They couldn't take over the game. So basically, they became like team shot callers, and they would like micromanage.
That's a good idea.
You had players like Doublelift or Tyler One, or there was dancers effectively playing support. Half of them molding because Tyler One's just sat there like, my top laner doesn't know how to press R. Legitimately doesn't know how to press R on Malphite. And I would sit there and watch that twice over than a regular season game. Like, I would watch that. I sat up not just because they got drops here. Riot did get it really right there in terms of giving drops for that event, which they, doesn't happen with a lot of esports in a lot of places. But that is exactly how you tap into existing fan base, and that is my golden standard of how League should be building back its fan base, because League has always struggled to reach people outside of the people who already play League. So having local events for people to connect with other people that might play League and introduce people who might be out there and have some kind of groundswell from these huge events, if you can get those big figures on board, I think that's your gold mine. Because I think as it stands, and before that happened, I think NA was in a really weird spot with a lot of its road trips where I'm like, I'm not sure if they'll sell out. I'm not sure how successful they'll be. I'm not as tied in with the NA system. But I'm sure they were good quality events. But the question is, how big can you take that, and how often can you do that? Well, with having the huge groundswell, now you have interest. Do something with it.
I've got one last angle for you. Go on, Peter.
No, just because people
Yeah,
may
go
not
on.
know what this event is. You had a challenger player playing support on like Lulu or Nami or whatever every game, and then the other 4 players were just variety streamers.
Right.
Like some of them decent at least, some of them like diamond level, some of them like not even pods. I mean, there's a very
There's
famous
someone
clip
who'd
of,
actually
like,
never touched the game before, literally
Yeah,
loading
exactly.
in and say, "Hey, can I use a controller to play this game?" And just see like Tyler One's face literally just drop.
So that's what the event was.
I'll give you an example also of why I think NA has to approach it differently. And their real problem in the League of Legends era is because Riot is based in LA and in California, they just wanted to have it in their backyard. And also, as Monty's pointed out many times, they also wanted all the associated status of you have the event in LA and it's in a big venue. And then you get to feel like you're part of sports and media and part of Hollywood and all weird, like LARP shit that shouldn't really be part of making it like a sustainable business. I can tell you the model I think they need to look at in NA is to move away from LA. And here's why. Because one thing I didn't know myself is when I grew up as a boy and I watched WWF, now WWE and WCW and all these American wrestling shows, to me already it was crazy because of the spectacle. It's like nothing like you've ever seen. So American, so big, etc. But what I didn't know was this. The circuits they made their name and their money off in the early days, it wasn't like going to New York. You'd do that for like the giant pay-per-view. The rest of it was all these backwater places that were in the middle of nowhere where there wasn't a load of options for entertainment and you could get a cheap venue and you could find a way to make the costs work. And also everything was, that's also where you put the lesser fighters on and you build up their name and stuff. And these small circuits, well, here's what's funny. They already did that in esports. That's what MLG did. When MLG did all these console games, they also would go to places that were like Raleigh, North Carolina and Ohio and Columbus, like places that aren't, LA and Chicago and the biggest. They did because they knew you can't get straight into the straight menus. You got to build it up and you got to go small and you've got to get an audience that a year on year knows you're going to come back, etc. So I also think if with NA, since they've somewhat been scaled down, they should just go back to grassroots and build it up that way again. I figure, I don't know which it would be. I'm sure you could get some data person who could find this out for you in the modern day. I'm sure there's some smaller place you could go to where if you advertised in advance and set up a massive like homestand type thing, you'd probably fill the venue in a way that sadly in LA you might not, because on a Saturday night in LA people can go do whatever they want, can't they?
Sure, fair enough. Yeah, good point for sure.